Madam Chair, I move that Dr. James Beers be allowed to participate in tonight's work session and action items meeting via electronic communication due to a family vacation in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, where Dr. Beers may be calling in from.
Second.
Ms. Souza?
Mr. Dowell?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cook?
Aye.
Ms. Zomby?
Item 2.3, motion to certify closed session.
Madam Chair, do you just want to mention that Dr. Beers is not actually online at the moment, so he,
That's what I, well, Ms. Cook covered that, so yes, he may be, we're not sure if he has internet
Okay.
connectivity, if he's, we know that right now he doesn't.
so if he gets it in the next hour or so, we'll have him. As far as the certification of closed session, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
Ms. Souza?
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye.
Ms. Zomby?
Aye. Item 3, Ms. Souza, would you take the roll, please?
Ms. Cook?
I'm here.
Mr. Dowell?
Here.
Ms. Hummel?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mrs. Young?
Here.
Ms. Zomby?
Ms. Cook, would you move to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda with the following modification, to switch items 7.01 and 7.02 to allow the Return to Learn Forward WJCC's presentation to take place prior to the capital improvement plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Souza?
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel? Ms. Zomby?
Aye. On to item 4.1, announcements and superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My report this evening is a real page-turner, thanks to the staff and volunteers at Berkeley Middle School. Every Friday during the summer, they've been giving away free books to students as part of the Books for Berkeley Bulldogs campaign. The community donated the new and gently used books. Monetary donations were also accepted and used to buy books. Some weeks, staff set up an outdoor free library at the school. Other weeks, they visited neighborhoods throughout the community. Reading for pleasure is always a good idea, and our students have had a little more time at home this summer to do just that. And finally this evening, I want to say congratulations to our SHIP and Parent Academy teams for earning first place in the 2020 Virginia School Board Association's Food for Thought competition in the Wellness and Physical Activity category. The Student Health Initiative Program, or SHIP, earned the top award in the 10,000 student bracket for the WJCC Moves at Home program. When school buildings closed due to COVID-19 pandemic last spring, the SHIP program and Parent Academy collaborated to develop new ways to reach students and their families at home. Together, they created WJCC Moves at Home, a series of videos centered on our shared goals of health and wellness. These short videos provided tips and activities demonstrating how physical activity could be integrated into daily life while families were staying at home.
Classes, and I'm doing a video today how to make a exercise active at home. All you're going to need is app on hand, paper clip, and then a writing. So basically, you take your and you'll divide it into sections. Or within each section, you'll actually write exercises. And you can choose these, your activities, so that they can choose what exercise. All you'll need to do after you do, take a paper, writing utensil, and then put it right in the of the plate. And once you the paper clip, and it lands in different areas of the. This says 20 hours. And then they spin it again. I'd even want to let them spin it, and sometimes more. And you do, and then basically, now you can do just like this. Just as you do it, so there's a lot of work, and when they're getting a little bit. Work, they would do exercise with work, they do keep going back so that cells and getting that heart pump while they're actually participating. It's easy to make, and thank you for watching.
Other videos featured outdoor activities and cooking demonstrations. Each video was practical as well as entertaining. One video was especially timely. It featured easy-to-use stress reduction techniques that were perfect for both parents and children during the pandemic. Congratulations again to the WJCC Moves at Home organisers, and a big thank you to the Williamsburg Health Foundation, which funds the SHIP programme through a grant. Madam Chair, that completes my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Moving on to item 5.1, citizens' comments. We have individuals who have called in. Due to the high expected call volume, we limited the time to 1 minute. It's my understanding that several community members called in multiple times, and so we will just be playing the first message from each person who called in.
Demetra Quintanilla, 114 Rondane Place, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188. My question is for parents who work 9 to 5. What accommodations are being made for the children who are in daycares that don't support online learning?
My name is Leah Henretta. I have 2 children in the James City County Schools system, one going into Lafayette, one in Massachusetts. My address is 706 Hamilton Street in Williamsburg. I'm calling to comment on the Plan 1 choice for remote learning. I am a single parent that works 2 jobs, and with this decision, you are forcing parents to have to stay home and school their children. We pay taxes for teachers to actually be in school teaching. This is a horrible decision. It is very harmful for our children. And the school division have made a horrible mistake with this decision, and you have done nothing to help our children. You are only hurting them.
My name is Lisa Heck, and my address is 250 Thomas Nelson Lane. This is in regard to the decision to be made about remote learning. My question or comment is, how will the board help the schools use structure for remote learning? What type of logistics will be handled? How will some subject matter be handled, like mathematics, which is upper level mathematics for high school children, high school students, be taught remotely when they need a teacher involved. Those type of questions need to be addressed by the board as well. Thank you.
My name is Stephen Jones, and I am extremely disappointed and disgusted that you have come up with a decision to hinder the education of our students based on very low numbers. And I think it's just extremely disrespectful and disingenuous to make this decision based on minimal information. You are hurting the students. You're making a mistake, and I will be taking legal action against the school board governor, and everybody involved. It is ridiculous what you guys are doing.
My name is Kate McAdoo, and I live at 2009 Langman Place. I'm calling to say that I unequivocally disagree with the Path 1 learning plan. The Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, and many other nationally recognized organizations have recently stated that in-person school is a necessity for the well-being of our children. You've chosen a direction that completely contradicts their expertise. Schools were given a free pass last spring due to our unprecedented situation. 7 months will have passed from March 2020 to the start of the new school year, and yet you still have nothing. How will my 5-year-old learn anything on a tablet with only 2.5 instructional hours per day? Parents may need to quit working since we've become full-time educators for our children. Parents are not qualified. Teachers must be considered essential and must be mandated to teach in person during this time. While the struggles of having in-person school are obvious, it's your job to do better. If you support virtual learning, you are not supporting education. No learning took place last spring. It was simply checking a box.
Hey, my name's Tracy Crockett. I live at 23934 Forge Road, Toledo. We're calling in support of virtual school for at least the first 9 weeks, probably the first semester. Children are not replaceable, and COVID is too dangerous. In fact, teachers aren't replaceable either. You just have to do the right thing to protect the people. It's an inconvenience for everybody. I understand it's a hard decision. At the end of the day, you have to be able to look in the mirror and put your head on your pillow at night. Protect the people first. Thank you.
Michael Hosang, 8404 Community Court. I have a daughter with a learning disability who has been on an IEP her entire life. This past spring, she struggled mightily with the online learning. She needs face-to-face teacher instruction to learn, and the school board is taking that away from her. You are severely crippling her for years to come, if not for her life. I beg you to reconsider this decision, allow in-person instruction. The school board and a small vocal group of teachers and parents need to stop living in fear and look at the real science of this disease. The majority of parents and teachers in your poll want to open schools. Why have an unscientific poll if you're not even going to file the overwhelming results? The CDC has also stated that children should attend in-person instruction this fall. Children rarely contract the coronavirus, and when they do not pass it on to adults. Teachers are in one of the safest industries since the majority of their interaction will be with the same children.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Height, and my address is 7 Sumner Court, Toledo, Virginia. My first question is, with virtual learning, how do teachers determine if a child is advanced or falling behind? The second one is, how are parents expected to care for younger children while helping their child with virtual learning? The third is, how often will children physically see their teachers? The fourth one is, how will virtual learning impact early readers and children trying to learn basic language skills, especially with poor internet connections and/or problems with computers? The fifth one is, what time of the day and for how long are children expected to be present at their computers? And the sixth is, will Path 2 be considered before 9 weeks are over, or will the first 9 weeks only be virtual? Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.
My name is Ezra Height, and I'm from Toledo. My line of questioning start with, what are the qualifications of your mentioned local health experts, and why did they go against the CDC's recommendation for reopening schools? What percentage of students decided to take the virtual learning path, and is the remaining number of students less than the required gathering state limitation of 50? Are dividers in the classrooms considered since the number of students is reduced? Also, how is only 2.5 hours a day sufficient for instruction when a traditional school day lasted 7+ hours? And finally, will teachers' pay be cut for the reduced hours, and will the money go to parents who are now teachers' aides?
Hi, this is Dana Hogan. I'm a teacher at Jamestown High School, and I would like for teachers not to have to report to the school building unless they want to. I will need, as a special education teacher, to go in probably once every couple weeks, maybe for filing, but I can see all my students online. I think as long as other things are closed, that we don't want anyone meeting as a group, and I think that it's safer for all of us to social distance as far as possible until things are under control. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Graham. I am at 6304 Adams Hunt Drive in Williamsburg. My daughter is a rising ninth grader. I am calling, I guess, to make a request that the classes be the semester-long classes, what the original block schedule was, just so there's less classroom, as many classes to manage the entire year long. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Maria Zacordonez. We live at 108 Albemarle Drive, Williamsburg, 23185. I have two kids. They both at Bright Beginnings program. I definitely think you have to open schools at September. Most of the kids are not in group of risk and they can continue to go to school. Even American Academy of Pediatrics advised to open schools because it's much worse for kids to stay at home than go to school. They have to be around other kids for normal development. I believe you will make a right, smart decision in the best interest for our children. Thank you and have a great day.
Hi, my name is Kavieta Benish, address 211 Thomas Nelson Lane in Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm calling to advocate for a return to semester-long courses for the high schools. I have a daughter at War Hill. The shift requires students to juggle too many classes in an online format. It will slow down my daughter's progress through her foreign languages, and this returning to a semester format would make the transition back from online learning to in-person learning much smoother after the first semester. Thank you.
Ellen Lovelace, 3716 Mesa River, Williamsburg. I'd like to request you to please return to semester classes for high school for this year. Although hybrid model with year-long makes foreign language classes and math easier, it would be appropriate to change to a hybrid model for next year, not for this year. It's just too many classes to keep track of with classes online, especially for families with multiple high school students. And if we ever get to path 3, students will only have one lesson per class per week in person. It also makes it impossible to graduate early. It makes it much more difficult to schedule classes for any student with dual credit programs, and it's going to be a nightmare when you get to spring with the high school class schedules already locked in. So again, please return to a semester class schedule for this year, primarily because 8 classes online is just too much to keep track of, especially for families with multiple high school.
Heading to Nancy, 3792 Mulberry Lane. Just wanted to thank you all for choosing what is safest for everyone, not just our teachers and staff and students, but safest for the families that they go home to, and in that respect also our community. The teacher, virtual teaching is so much more work and time consuming, but worth the extra communication effort and time spent to keep our families safe.
Drive, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23985. I've been teaching elementary art in WJCC school since 2002. I wanted to express my appreciation for the very difficult decision to go with Path 1 online learning for the first 9 weeks of school. The decision makers are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. As it comes and staff. As a teacher, I would love nothing but to be back at school teaching the almost 800 students I see each week in my art room. My teaching was incredibly challenging last week. I felt like I was a first-year teacher again many days. Even with that said, the spread of the virus is a very legitimate threat to the safety of students, their families, and fellow staff members. This is Lori Ann Evans. I live in Williamsburg, Virginia. My daughter attends Hornsby Middle School. My comment. Your letter sent out to us last Monday stated that local health experts say that in-person instruction is not recommended for the fall. I work for the nation's largest healthcare provider and receive numerous daily coronavirus-related updates, and not one time has any of that literature stated a need to keep children out of the classroom. Your local health experts are highly suspect if they are saying anything contrary to what the nation's leading physicians, statisticians, administrators, and researchers are saying. We are more than 6 months into this pandemic and have learned a considerable amount about how to live with and manage this virus. Your comment that teachers and curriculum experts spend all summer creating lessons and materials specifically for remote learning is very revealing about your intentions to return children to school. What were they doing during this time to adapt school environments to in-class learning? Did you try and fail or not try at all? This in no way creates a...
Rebecca Wheeler, 3900 Blue Ridge Court. I would just like to say that I know the decision to go virtual for the first 9 weeks was extremely difficult, but I feel that it was the best decision for all students, teachers, and staff during this unpredictable time. Thank you.
My name is Earl Jones. I live at 4241 Teakwood Drive in Williamsburg, Virginia. As a practicing pediatrician and father of 2 elementary school children, I was surprised and dismayed by the decision to proceed with only virtual learning for the first 9 weeks of this school year. My surprise was because while the announcement cites rising rates of COVID-19 in our region, rates in Williamsburg and James City County remain low. And data from the Virginia Department of Health, current as of 10 a.m. today, show that local rates are under 60% of those in Richmond, Norfolk, and Virginia Beach. This, together with scientific evidence that young children rarely transmit the disease, indicate that in-person instruction would be safe for all involved. My dismay was due to the adverse effects of not being in school on children, particularly those in vulnerable populations. Many children will be missing out on much-needed counseling services, nutrition, and special education services. Many working families will also not have the time or resources or...
Hi, my name is Heather Jones. My daughter goes to Jamestown High School and will be a junior this year. I would like the school to go back to the semester-long classes so that the AP courses and the others will not be as big a hardship throughout the whole year and will not be all at the same time. Thank you so much. Bye. My address is 3201 Stony Creek Drive West, Williamsburg 23185.
Hi, my name is Victoria Shoemaker, 5532 Westmoreland Drive, Williamsburg, Virginia 23188. Please let the high school students go back to semester classes, especially since it's online learning. Please. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Amy Coleman, 136 Cooley Road, Williamsburg. I wanted to discuss the semester-long classes and versus year-long classes. And I feel like there is no benefit to most students by making these classes year-long. And in fact, it harms upperclassmen that have already planned their curriculum since middle school. Middle schoolers won't be able to take higher-level math classes unless they're designated as gifted and Envisions classes. Even the consultant said that there was a slight benefit to learners who struggle with year-long with core classes being switched to year-long. We already have many of those core classes that are year-long. I know Algebra 2 is year-long, Geometry is year-long, Algebra 1 is year-long, most English classes are year-long. So I'm not sure why we can't just continue to make those classes both year-long and semester-long, depending on the preference of the student. If this truly is the best...
My name is Matt Michael, 4833 Bristol Circle. This message is to share my thoughts against the board's unfortunate decision to begin the new school year with 9 weeks of virtual instruction. First, I'd like to point out that in your own polling, 3 of the top 4 issues that district employees responded that they were very concerned about were supporting students with disabilities, lack of adult support for learning at home, and loss of social interaction. None of these concerns can be appropriately mitigated with full virtual instruction. But since you've already made your decision and this message isn't going to change it, I make one very strong recommendation. Since you have now placed working parents and single parents in a no-win situation, having to choose between providing for their family or the education of their children, you must allow for flexibility in the online instruction schedule, because helping a student connect with educators when the parent must work outside of the home is completely impossible if the district has dictated an exact schedule for that student to log in for instruction. Thank you.
Hello, this is Janet Spring at 107 Laurel Court, Williamsburg.
Thank you for your decision to have virtual school for the first 9 weeks and to reassess the COVID situation at that time. Please continue to make these school opening decisions based on scientific data and not public opinion. Teachers, students, and parents all want to be back at school in person, but that won't happen until the pandemic is under control. Virtual schooling is difficult for everyone. The teachers and students miss each other, and parents lucky enough to still have jobs are having major difficulties finding childcare. But the continuing rise in cases of COVID-19 throughout the country show us the importance of taking this seriously. Thanks again for assessing the data and having the courage to act accordingly regardless of public backlash.
Ann Smith, 105 Underwood Road, Williamsburg, James City County. First comment, the VDH interim guidance for reinstating community mitigation measures in K-12 school settings, dated July 24, 2020, permits in-school instruction for low to moderate community transmissions. I encourage the superintendent to reconsider in-school attendance in some capacity for all students. Question 2, or statement, barring a reconsideration, will a comprehensive plan to open our school to all students in-person learning be available for parents' input? Has a date been set to reveal this plan prior to the end of the 9-week virtual learning? Comment 3, pediatricians have been vocal across the country in the value of opening our schools. What local pediatricians have been consulted in support of 100% virtual learning? And comment 4, it is disconcerting that the return to learn discussion item was not considered priority on the agenda. Hi, my name is Olivia Lawson, and I'm a teacher in the school division. I just wanted to reach out and say how much I appreciate the thoughtful decision that was made in favor of safety for our students, our families, teachers, and staff. I love my job, and I desperately miss being in the classroom. It's definitely not the ideal situation, but as someone who lives in a high-risk household with COVID, I have been very stressed this summer, thinking about having to choose between the job I love and keeping my family safe. So thank you for making the proactive choice to keep everybody safe to start the year. I know I am personally very committed and excited about making this first year the best it can be for all of our students through the virtual platform. Thanks so much for all your work.
Robert Oppiker, 107 Laurel Court, Williamsburg, Virginia. There is much to say, but I will be brief. As the art teacher at Matthew Whaley Elementary School, I would like to thank Dr. Herron and the board for making a difficult decision to start the year off in Path 1 online learning. We all want to get back into the classroom. Teaching face-to-face is what we do best and what is best for most students and parents. But doing so safely must continue to be the highest priority for students, teachers, staff, and community. I know and trust that you will continue to base all your decisions on sound data and science and will safeguard the health and lives of our community. Thank you all for your strong leadership as we go forward into this new school year.
My name is Lindsay Taylor. I live in York County, but I am a teacher in Williamsburg, James City County Public Schools, and I just wanted to share my support in the decision to start the school year virtually. It's the safe and responsible decision, the best decision for our students, our staff, and our community.
Hi, this is Mallory Young, 115 Clarendon Court, and I'm calling to give thanks to Dr. Herron and the school board for the 100% virtual start for the school year. Thanks for recognizing that many of our area classrooms cannot support face-to-face learning because of being windowless or having older ventilation systems. And thanks for considering the physical and psychological impact on teachers who would be facing as many as 75 to 100 students per day on an AB block schedule. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Delzer. My home address is 201 Governor Edward Knott Court, Williamsburg, Virginia, in James City County. I am calling to request that high school students do not do year-long classes and that they will be allowed to do semester courses for this year due to the complexity of how the year is starting off, to make it a little bit easier for students to endure the virtual learning. Thank you for this consideration and have a good day.
Rosalind Roberts, 2982 Irondale Road. I just wanted to support and thank the superintendent for making the difficult decision to start the school year remotely. Although this may not be the ideal situation, I believe that it's the best and most responsible decision to ensure the safety of our students, teachers, and staff as we continue to deal with this virus in our area. Thank you.
Hi, this is Krista Smitty. We live at 5303 Center Street, Williamsburg, Virginia. I would like to state that we would like the Lafayette High School to go back to semester classes instead of year-long classes for the students to have a better choice and keep track of online courses better, and especially if they're trying to take 2 math classes in a year, it would help out. That's everything. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
My name is Sarah Eberly. My address is 195 Merrimack Trail, Apartment 6 in Williamsburg, Virginia. I was just calling to let you know I think it would be a great idea for high school students to only have 4 classes while doing online learning. As a parent who did cyber schooling in Pennsylvania with both 4 and 8 classes, it was a lot easier for my son to only have 4 classes to handle. So please think about that when you are deciding on what our children are going to do this school year. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jenna Cumming. I live at 100 Lakeview Drive in Toledo. Both my sons are students at JBB, and I wanted to just call and thank you as the school board for making the tough decisions that you guys have been having to make. Obviously, this is an unprecedented time, and we keep saying that, but I know you're inundated with criticisms and questions and concerns, but there's also a large group of parents who are standing behind you guys, no matter what decisions that you make, as long as our kids are safe, we're in support of you. So I just wanted to take a moment to encourage you guys, to let you know that there are people who are praying for you and who are thankful for the dedication that you have to our students and our teachers. I just know that you are loved. Thank you.
Hi, I am a concerned parent about the high school going to a 8 classes at one time model. I would like to return to the semester classes, especially given all of the new way of learning with this virtual model, which I am in support of, and I appreciate you guys being very safe and careful. But I am also really feeling like going back to semester classes is a better choice than having 8 classes at a time for a student. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Kathy Boyer, and I live at 2801 Derby's Mill Road in Williamsburg, 23185. And I'm calling to advocate to have high school students keep their block scheduling for at least this year. The online learning has been difficult for some of our students, and having them only take 4 classes at a time will greatly help them with their stress levels and be able to keep up with their classes. And when we return to a hybrid schedule eventually, having a teacher 2 days in a row would be much better than only being able to see that teacher once a week, as they would if they were going to do an AB schedule. This would also help students who are trying to advance their classes, and also students who are taking 2 maths this year where they were planning on taking them back to back. They are now going to have to take them concurrently. So I would please encourage you to have our students.
I believe that concludes our public comment. And again, for community members who called in multiple times, as I said, we only played your first message, but please feel free to email the rest of your comments to the board. We do want to hear from the community, and we thank everyone for calling in and sharing your thoughts. And I think as we talk some more tonight about return to learn, some answers will be provided to some of the questions that were asked. So, moving on to proposed agenda items, the budget calendar, 6.1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Annually, we bring a budget calendar for your consideration, and Ms. Ewing, our Chief Financial Officer, will present that this evening. Thank you, Ms. Ewing.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. 21 budget process, and for your review this evening, budget calendar for fiscal 22. We're proposing a similar timeline that was used this past year, and I will highlight some of these dates for you. October 6th, we will capital improvement. October 20th, public hearing, CIP plan. November 10th will be the school board's prioritization of the CIP recommendation. November 17th, another public hearing. A joint meeting with the James City County Board of Supervisors and Williamsburg City Council is and December 8th would be the adoption of the capital improvement plan. Then in January, we would move into the development of the operating budget, proposing the same format as we followed the past 2 years for the budget workshops, with the first being held on January 5th prior to the regular board meeting, and the second workshop on January 19th and prior to the regular board meeting. A pre-budget public hearing is also proposed for January 19th to gather input from the community, and February 16th would be its proposed budget. March 2nd would be a public hearing on the proposed budget. Also in March, a joint meeting with the James County Board of Supervisors and Council is proposed. And March 16th would be the board's approval of the operating budget. And then May 18th would be the projected date of when we would have information back from James City County and the City of Williamsburg to finalize our budget for fiscal year 22.
Ms. Cook and then Ms. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Ewing. I actually have a request and then a comment. For the 2 items that are in red, the joint meetings, I would just appreciate if we could alter that for the, before we adopt it, to add more specificity. The one in December is really about the CIP, and probably where we want to talk about enrollment, and then the one in March is about the operating budget. So I think if we unpack that and make that clearer. I know this is our document and doesn't belong to the county or the city, but at least in our communication, being clear that we want to kind of segregate those 2 things, I think would be a good thing to do, unless you disagree, in which case.
Sure, we can take care of that.
And then not this year, because I know you all have a lot going on, but just in a future year, since we do spend time with a work session, a specific budget work session for the operating budget, I wonder if it would benefit us in a future year to set aside an hour. Maybe it doesn't have to be 4 hours, but an hour or so to really dive into the CIP in a future year, so that it could get some. But I don't think this year is the year to do that. But.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Young.
Yes, Ms. Ewing, I appreciate the calendar. I guess I would request that we would have updates from the county and maybe the city telling us the status of funding. Because, this is basically the same calendar we've followed for almost all the years that I've been on the school board. And I think, in my way of thinking, it's kind of pie in the sky, because we know that things are not normal. And so I would appreciate some, an update as to what is happening currently. We know it's not good, but I would appreciate that information before we have to make any decisions.
As we receive information.
Oh, please, because it's hard to make decisions without the information.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mr. Kelly?
So if I understand what Ms. Cook was talking about with the December meetings, we want that block to read joint meeting for discussion of the capital improvement plan, and then the joint meeting for discussion of the operating budget. And to Mrs. Young's point, so General Assembly comes back in January, but it's supposed to be a short session, I think, this year. So So by February, we should have a kind of a little bit of a read as to where the state is, I would expect, on their budget, and then the supervisors should also be pretty far along as far as that. So hopefully we'll be able to meet the calendar. It's just going to be different numbers this year, I think. So,
I definitely agree.
thank you.
Any additional questions for Ewing? Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Okay, moving on to item 6.2, authorization to permit city-county use of school buses. And this, again, is an annual approval.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Snipes should be coming in this evening to talk about our annual agreement or requirement to get permission to use, for other entities to use school buses. Mr. Snipes, welcome.
Madam Chair, school board members, and Dr. Herron. Tonight's agenda item is an annual request to authorize and permit city and county to use school buses. Many times the county requests school buses for things like our Parks and Rec, or if they're having an event. Tonight's agenda item will support Virginia Code Section 22.1-12, which says the school board of any school division may enter into agreements with the governing body of any county, city, or town in the school division, any state agency, or any established or identified pursuant to the United States Public Law 8973. Questions?
Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Snipes. I just wanted to ask you a question about the section on board docs that says costs associated with the use of school buses by the city and county are paid by the appropriate governing body and do not accrue to the school division. Well, normally, I agree with that 100%. We are not in normal times, and I know there's a lot up in the air with regard to children and where they're going to be during the day if they're not in school. So I just wanted to ask you if there's any flexibility with that statement for this year, what your thoughts are on that.
The law also goes on to state that in each such agreement shall provide for reimbursing the school board in full or for the proportionate share of any and all costs, both fixed and variable.
So it's not an option for us to, if we want to help out.
I think the language maybe suggests there is a little bit of flexibility on the amount that would be paid. From my reading of it, Mr. Snipes, is that correct?
There is some flexibility, but it says that each such agreement shall provide for reimbursing the school board in full for the proportionate share of any and all costs, both fixed and variable.
So there's not flexibility. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because I was curious if we could, just this year kind of chip in and if needed, because I think it's going to be one of those situations where everybody's kind of helping out to the best of their ability. And I just wanted to say I hope we can be the best community partner we can.
In previous situations, we've charged them for our driver mileage, but that was the
cost is just what it costs us, basically. Okay.
Mr. Kelly?
So, as Mrs. Cook said, these are not normal times. Has there been any interest in James? Well, we do this every year, and we approve these every year. Have any of the governing bodies talked about needing buses for any of their programs?
we currently support some Parks and Rec programs through the summer, summer camp, by transportation to our McKinney-Vento students that attend.
Okay. Are there any, speaking of costs that are variable, are there any cleaning expectations from the from the county or the city for our buses before they give them back to us?
They actually hire one of our drivers, which they pay, so our drivers understand what the process is to keep those.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. Young.
Thank you. Here. Mr. Snipes, how many McKinney-Vento students do we transport?
Have to get back.
And Ms. Bourgeois is not here tonight, and she may be able to answer it, but she's not well tonight, so she's at home.
Okay.
But we can certainly get that information for you, Ms. Young.
Just wondering during the summer how many of those students we support. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Snipes? Snipes. Moving on to item 6.3, revised policy JN Appendix A, student fee schedule for school year 20 and 21.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Every year we bring to you the annual fees associated with various courses in the school division, and Dr. Worley is going to present this tonight to you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Heron. Each year, we bring to the board an update on Appendix A of Policy JN, student fees, fines, and charges. This is not a policy change, however, it's an annual update on our fee schedule. For the school year 2020-2021, there are no changes to Appendix A and our school fees. However, we do want to note that we reviewed each fee with content coordinators and leaders, and additionally, we shared the information with the policy committee. For the 2021 school year, WJCC will prorate fees if necessary based upon need and the impact of COVID-19 on our learning paths. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer them at this time.
Dr. Worley? Okay. Now we're moving on, we're flipping, so we're going to move on to item 7.2, return to learn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our common goal for this year is to get every student back in person to school. On Wednesday, July 1st, Virginia entered Phase 3 about 5 weeks ago, and we were full of hope, believing we would be on track to return to learn on Path 3 of the Return to Learn WJCC Forward Plan. Last week, we made the decision to open schools in remote learning on Path 1 for the first 9 weeks. Making this decision allowed families time to finalise whether to take the family choice option or start on the first part of the continuum of the Return to Learn path. It also allowed us to begin planning and provide some stability for the start of the school year. We are starting on Path 1 on September 8th. However, from the outset, we will have some in-person instruction for our most vulnerable student population, and we fully intend to regularly assess the feasibility of incorporating in-person attendance for all students and staff members. It is heartbreaking not to see all of our students in person, but based on the guidance of the Virginia Department of Health and the Peninsula Health Department, I believe it's the best decision at this time. This evening we'd planned for a representative of the Peninsula Health Department to be here to present data and the rationale behind our decision to start on Path 1. Unfortunately, this afternoon we learned that the representative had a family health emergency. At the last minute, no one was able to take her place, as health department staff were working all night due to the tropical storm. We do plan to have someone to present that data at the next school board meeting. However, we do have one special guest this evening to present some current research and begin this discussion and increase our understanding. Dr. Kerry Dolan is a spatial epidemiologist. She has a PhD in healthcare policy and is an assistant professor at William & Mary. Dr. Dolan will present some current research about COVID-19 and its impact and address questions you may have this evening. Welcome, Dr. Dolan.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. Times are tough and decisions are hard. And I think, does this work if I click it? We can wait for that to load. So as an epidemiologist, I have these different tools that I can use to help me think about this pandemic. And kind of like if you set out to build a house, you can't build a house with just a screwdriver. You need lots of tools, and you need to use them all together in order to get the final product. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to show you these tools and shed some light on how they can be used so that it can all help us think about where we're going in our next steps. It's important to keep in mind that like you can't build the house with a screwdriver, you also can't just focus on one piece of data or on one news report or one media outlet. It really is a combination of all these pieces of information coming together to paint a picture about where we go next. So I think that's working, and we'll start here. So where do we start? We're starting by thinking about kids and the risk of disease. Like any good epidemiologist, we're starting out with a bang, and we've got this chart. What this chart tells us is that in this one study in China, that our kids aren't really getting that sick. That 97% of the kids that got sick with COVID were either asymptomatic or had mild or had moderate conditions. Now there's still that 3% that did get sick. Most of those kids are little kids. So there are infants or they're people that had other comorbid conditions. So obviously this is a global perspective and that's just where we're starting this narrative. We can look at this another way. So we can look at this domestically. So in the United States, what's going on with our kids and the disease risk? Look at hospitalization rates and it's telling us the same thing that we were seeing in China. So it's telling us that our kids, they're not getting seriously sick with COVID, that the hospitalization rate is about 2.4 per 100,000, and our kids, 5 through 17, compared to those that are 18 to 49 of about 48.5. So good news so far, we're starting out well. It looks like our kids aren't getting really sick if they get COVID. But it's not correct to say that they can't get very sick. The kids can. We just need to put it all in context. The question, though, that's more complicated and really important is, are these kids spreading the actual disease? And so there's two possibilities to think about. I know these slides, the font is small for you guys to see, but I think that you have a copy. I made it small on purpose so that you could have it as a reference and be able to look back at the actual citations and link to the data. But these two possibilities, the first one, this is one that I'm really scared about. So it's this idea that I'm going to send my son off to school and that he's going to go and somehow get COVID and be asymptomatic. And I'm not going to know about that as a mom because he's not going to have any signs or symptoms, and he's going to bring it home and he's going to give it to Grams or give it to Gigi, and they're going to get really, really sick. Let's peek into the data and see what it tells us about it. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of information out there that's scientifically validated. There is a study in the Netherlands that tells us that most often when kids are sick with COVID, they weren't the first one to get it, that somebody else in their household got it. The second thing we're thinking about when we're thinking about this disease spread is whether or not these kids are actually getting infected more. So to know whether or not our kids are getting infected more than adults, we need to have really good population level sampling. And if we don't have that, then we need to have really good stratified random sampling. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist locally and it doesn't really exist in the United States, but we have other places, other countries we can look at and see what's going on there where they're doing more rigorous testing and more routine testing. So we can look at Italy, and then we can also look at Iceland. And in Italy and Iceland, we're seeing that the kids aren't spreading it a lot. So these first 4 slides, looking like good news. Kids aren't getting seriously sick with COVID and they're not spreading it a lot. However, it is not correct. It's not correct to draw the conclusion that our kids can't spread COVID. The message from those first 4 slides are just that they're not getting infected as much as adults. So the $1 million question, what we all want to know is, if we put these kids back in school, what's going to happen? Are they going to get really sick? Are our teachers going to get sick? Are the staff going to get sick? Are the kids going to bring it home and then we all get sick? And we don't have good national level data for that. But we do have 15 countries that have gone back to school. And based on that, we can check it out and see what they found. Unfortunately, there's not really good, consistent scientific evidence that goes across all the countries. So when we look at a school like Germany, they all went back to school and the kids got really sick, but the staff was okay. That's not what happened in Israel, and it's not what happened in South Korea. The cases went up and the schools closed. So unfortunately, we don't have a clear path forward based on either looking at infection, based on looking at spread, or based on looking at what has happened in other countries when our kids go back to school. So, what are we going to do? We're going to start to look at our local data. Now this slide might look familiar to some of you out there. This is the slide from the governor's presentation last week. It's looking at the positivity rate. And I picked this slide to show you guys because it's a number that people like to hang their hat on. So remember when we started this thing out, I told you we can't rely on one number, we can't rely on one media outlet, we can't rely on one news article. When I look at this number and I see that the positivity rate is about 10.8% in the eastern region, and we're looking at the eastern region because our state is divided into 5 different health regions. Williamsburg-James City County is in the eastern region. The rest of the state averages about 6%. And I think, oh, that's not good. It sends off a red flag, but that's not the be-all, end-all. It's not just one number. So the next thing I need more information. And I turn to a model. So the models that I look at are coming out of UVA. I'm also looking at some that are made in England. I look at them that are come out of IHME out of Seattle. The UVA model allows us to drill down to a local level. So within the Eastern Health Region, we're part of the Peninsula Health District. So I peeled back the data and I looked at it to see what's going on in terms of risk in our age groups. So is it just our college students maybe coming back and we're seeing an increase in those ages? Or is it still these older adults where we're seeing the increase? And that was our narrative around March, April. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is the rate surge in all age groups, including our kids. So it's not just one age group. Across all age groups in the Peninsula Health Districts, we're seeing the rates increase. What you see on this slide is called an attack rate, and it's one number that I like because it allows me to look at risk, and so that's why I picked it. So as a result of what data we're seeing in the Eastern region and the data we see in the Peninsula Health District, we got a tweet that went out from Governor Northam, and he said, direct quote up there, but he says, we're taking action to turn this thing around. So we put in some policy recommendations, and then he also reminded us that we have things that we can do. We're washing our hands. We're avoiding close contact. We're covering our mouths and faces and covering our coughs and sneezes. We're cleaning and disinfecting things, and we're monitoring our daily health. So as an epidemiologist, I'm pretty excited that we've got these public health interventions that we can use that are cost effective. They're things people can do at home. They're easily implemented. So imagine a world where we could somehow do something about cancer if all we had to do is wear a face mask and wipe down our table. It's pretty exciting that these things do exist and that they're easily something that we can use. What are we learning from what I've told you? We're learning that kids are less likely to get seriously sick, and they're less likely to spread the disease, but that risk is not zero. There still is a risk there. We're also learning that in all the age groups, we're seeing a surge in cases, a surge in risk. With more risk, with more cases, comes more infection. The number one question that people ask me these days is, how are we going to know if we move off of this path? How are we going to know if we move off of this phase? And the answer to that question is, it depends on how we integrate what we think with how we feel and what we can do. So, I told you a whole lot tonight about how to think about this. There's 5 indicators that I like to think about when it comes to the data. I look at the percent positivity. I look at these models that are coming out of UVA. I look at the R0 value that's telling me something about the spread. I'm looking at the hospitalizations, and then the 5th one varies depending on the reliability of the data, but right now it's the attack rate. What we can do about it is how we can implement these public health interventions. How well can we socially distance? How well can we enforce the use of masks? Can we get plexiglass? Can we configure our classrooms? And then finally, equally as important as what we can do and what we can think is how people feel. So one way we can incorporate how people feel is this Know Your Number article. It was in the Richmond Times-Dispatch in early June, and it's the scale, 1 to 5, of your risk preference or your risk tolerance. So 1 is you're on complete lockdown, 5, you are ready to go off to the Maldives with some hand sanitizer. And it's a tool to start a dialogue about how people feel about their risk. That's just one example. There's more that can be used. There's qualitative studies that can be done to get information from teachers and families and students. But it's this integration of how we think, what we can do, and how we feel that will then allow us to move forward as a community. So that's all I had prepared for you guys. I'm happy to take any questions or turn it over to Dr. Herron.
Board members have questions for Dr. Dolan?
I do.
Young?
Thank you, Dr. Dolan, for the presentation. I just had a question, because when I called the Peninsula call center to get information about data by age, the funny doctor I spoke to, who was a lot of fun to talk to, stated that there was no data by age. Can you tell us your source where you got that information?
Yeah, so it's linked in the, so again, I'm sorry for the small font, but I was really trying to make this like a resource, standalone resource, so that you could go back and pull up the data. I think I sent Dr. Heron this particular PDF, but it's the models that are coming out UVA. Every week they have an update, and you can go look at the weekly update. And in that update, they tell you what's going on statewide, they tell you how the R0 values changed, and then you can drill down and look at what's going on by district. It is important that you realize these are models. So these are spatial epidemiological models that are predicting what's going to happen based on existing case data.
You mentioned that we just aren't testing well enough here locally to understand exactly how students are responding, children are responding to COVID-19 in our local area. Is that right? Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm an epidemiologist, and I'm going to like tests because it gives me more information about who's sick and who isn't.
Right.
And so an aggressive test strategy is an intervention that we have to keep people well, and that's how I look at testing. So I would argue for more testing.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. You also later mentioned that we're seeing rate surging in all age groups, including kids, including children. Where is that information? Is that part of this UVA model that I can't really see well?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
part of that UVA
okay.
model. And
Okay.
I'm happy to send you the PDF right after this. There's
What-
probably pages and pages that are by the different districts. And I circled ours because ours is always in that same spot where that black circle is.
I'm particularly most interested in what Williamsburg and James City counties numbers look like. Do we know that?
Yeah, so I don't work at VDH, I work at William & Mary, and so I'm not in their surveillance staff. I was a state epidemiologist for several years before I went back to get my PhD, so I'm very familiar with their surveillance systems. I don't know what data that they're publicly releasing in terms of the counts for this area. So a lot of my work is focused on what level of geography can we have the most reliable data, and trying to drill down to get the lowest level of data we can to try and make decisions. Sometimes, even though we really want to have it at the lowest level, like a locality, it's not the most stable, it's not the best. So we have to roll up one level so that we can get good trends and good information. So I don't know, again, I don't know what they'll publicly release, but I know that I'm confident in these district level estimates and also the regional level estimates.
You mentioned that there is a surge. You use this word surge, and I hear that word a lot coming from you and your expertise. Is there some way to quantify exactly what a surge is, or is this just a catchphrase that we hear a lot?
I think it's jargon that we should
Okay.
probably work on eliminating from our.
I hear surge, I hear
vernacular.
spike. So for you and your professional experience, when would you likely want to use that word? When are we going from just a little bit of an increase to an all-out spike? Or surge?
So I look at moving averages over a period of time to detect aberrations in case count. And a surge to me, I'm just using it synonymous with increase. But now that you're saying that, I recognize how, that word implies.
It's different things to different
Dramatic
people,
than it
and
might
it
be.
could be dramatic, yeah.
Mhm.
But for you professionally, I mean, if we're looking at one or two cases and none of those are students, none of those are kids for months on end, every day there's one or two cases, when would you suggest that it's a spike or a surge for us, given our populace? Given the number of people that we home in Williamsburg, James City County?
It's really interesting because I was just having a conversation about this earlier today, because really what we're interested in knowing is the change in the delta. So over time, what change are we seeing and what matters? And I think that I don't have a magic number for what I would want to see. It's this combination of all of these indicators together and seeing how all of these things, what's happening with all of them. So are we seeing increases in positivity? Are we seeing increases in the risk? Is our R0 value across the board getting higher? So we're spreading it more and more and more? Are our hospitals maxed out and we can't use them? So it's this combination of all these pieces that come together that then make me nervous. It's not just like one thing or one number.
I appreciate you bringing this information, this presentation to the board, and certainly for the viewing public, too, that I'm sure is clued into to what's happening here and now. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Dolan. I appreciate your coming here. I would commend to everyone to read your article or your op-ed piece about Know Your Number. I think it will help all of us gain a new respect for each other's sort of tolerance of risk and maybe change the conversation a little bit because we all are in different places and everybody's place, wherever their number is equally valid. My question to you actually is building off Mr. Dowell's question about Williamsburg and James City. Even if you did have a higher level of confidence in the hyperlocal data, given that you know this region really well, how wise do you think it is to look just at Williamsburg and James City County, given the geographic nature of the peninsula and the fact that, I don't know if you listened to public comment or not, but we had a couple of people who called who work here but live in different localities. So given the nature of our region, would you recommend looking, even if the data were good, just at Williamsburg and James City County, or would you look a little bit beyond that, given the...
Talking about division autonomy? Is that what you're getting at?
No.
No? Okay. I'm trying to understand, too. I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good point. I would want both. I would want to look at what's going on in Williamsburg, James City County if I can, just to know more. I don't think we have the data that I want here, and so that's why I rolled up. The point I think Kira is making is that people are moving around in this region, and people don't just stay just in Williamsburg, James City County. So it's important to see what's going on in the area around us, because we know that mobility is a big predictor of how this virus is spreading. And so if we know that there's a lot going on, that's why looking at Peninsula Health District's kind of interesting to me, because it incorporates what's going on in Newport News and the surrounding areas. And if people go back and forth, we've got a lot of staff that live in these other areas. We've got, my son goes to school right on the border of James City County and Newport News. They're mobile, they're moving back and forth. It's not like there are these fine lines that keep us in our geographic regions. So I always, as an epidemiologist, look at the region, and then I look at the area around the region.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
I just add as a piece of information, almost 20% of our staff actually live outside of James City County in the city of Williamsburg and travel to here to do their job every single day. 379 people.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for coming here this evening. My question goes to how good are we at understanding this virus, understanding how it transmits, understanding. So if we say that kids, if the data is telling us that kids don't get it and they don't, how close are we to understanding the science as to why that is, and not just the pure empirical data of this, but are we close to understanding that?
So it's a new virus. There's a lot of emerging information. We've all been on this roller coaster. 1 week we're doing this thing, and the next week we're doing that. And the science is changing and building over time. So I don't expect that we're not going to learn any new lessons. I mean, new lessons are going to come for all of us out of this virus. We haven't reached the end of discovery, if that's what you're getting at. I feel pretty good about a lot of the data and the studies that are coming out of China and also out of Europe. We also have some good information coming out of the United States, but a lot of that was done quickly. What we really need is longitudinal data, and we haven't had a lot of longitudinal data because it hasn't been going on all that long. So if you want to look at causal estimates, which are really our best estimates, that takes a lot of longitudinal data. And until we get those, it's a lot of looking at associations that have limitations.
I also my understanding is, and I am less than an amateur at all this, a vaccine is not going to be a silver bullet. So it's not going to be, if assuming that one comes and that one is available, it's not going to knock this thing out right away. I mean, I think we're going to be living with this for a pretty substantial period of time.
So, a vaccine is a great public health intervention. It's going to help a lot. But once the vaccine's developed, it's got to get rolled out. And then we got to figure out who gets it first and why and when and how. And to the best of my knowledge, those conversations are just starting because the vaccine isn't even here.
Right.
And so I do think, to your point, this is going to be around for a while. I hope that we evolve with it and that we are able to, move forward as a community in a way that makes sense for all of us and not stay in one place over time. But I don't think that if a vaccine's developed and comes out in November, that means that we're all going to be able to get it in November and we're all going to be able to move on.
Right.
There's a lot of supply chain things that have to happen in order for that to get out.
Right. The other term that you hear a lot is herd immunity.
Yeah.
So people getting it and not having substantial outcomes from it, is that a good thing?
So herd immunity is this epidemiological concept that is an idea where not everybody would have to be vaccinated, that if a certain percentage of the population gets vaccinated, then it protects the rest. So in my class at William & Mary, we always do something where we look at the number of people that got the flu shot, and then we talk about how the certain percentage of people who have the flu shot then protect those people in the class who didn't get the flu shot. And we monitor and we watch it. So with the flu shot, you want about, estimates vary, but about 80% of your population to get the flu shot. Then it'll have a protective effect for those other 20% that don't. So that's one reason we like the vaccine, is because it helps us establish herd immunity.
But also people who have had it and developed the antibodies is also a positive.
Yeah, I mean, the
direction.
antibodies, one thing that we don't know yet, or that I'm not aware of, maybe it's coming out and I haven't seen that data, or I'm not part of those discussions, but we don't know if you get the vaccine, then do you need a booster? You know how we have to get booster vaccines?
Sure,
We
right.
don't know how long the first vaccine lasts before you need the next one.
Right, we get flu shots every year.
Yep.
They try to guess on the mix, right, of
Right.
what it's going to be. So anyway, it's a complicated question.
It is complicated.
Thanks for coming. I really thought this was a great presentation. I definitely am one of the school board members that supported the administration's decision for our 9.5 because of the concerns that we have for infecting the students. However, I do want to bring up a lot of the public comments tonight talked about the CDC's recommendation to allow students to go back. And I just didn't know, when you're looking at that, could you talk to that at all? Do you feel comfortable talking to, that seems to be a very big data point or study that a lot of our callers, a lot of our parents are mentioning. I just didn't know if there's some specialist answer to your comment.
So I didn't hear all the public comments, so I don't know what they are, but I can imagine, people are nervous about how they're going to teach their kids at home, right? And especially people who both parents work outside the home, how we're going to do that. And I don't know, so what part of the CDC report did they specifically reference a certain part?
Pediatrics?
It's the pediatric, it was the CDC's concern that it was important to return to the classroom.
Pediatrics.
Yeah, I'm looking directly from the CDC. It says there have also been few reports of children being the primary source of COVID-19 transmission among family members. This is consistent with data from both virus and antibody testing suggesting that children are not the primary drivers of COVID-19 spread in schools or in the community. No studies are conclusive, but the available evidence provides a reason to believe that in-person schooling is the best interest of students, particularly in the context of appropriate mitigation measures similar to those implemented at essential workplaces.
Yeah, so that is very similar to what I told you, that kids are less likely to get seriously ill and then they're less likely to spread the disease. And I'm assuming that that CDC article is referencing some of these same seminal studies that are, finding these results. To to me, again, it's not just the data point, it's just not those two things. It's those other two pieces that are equally important. Like, I don't know as a school system what you can do about all the interventions and how you can put them all in place. I don't know if you can socially distance or have kids wear masks. I don't know how that all works out. And then I also don't know how you're taking into account like how people feel. So this discussion about where people are in terms of their risk and how you're talking about that and starting that dialogue. And then then the other thing I don't know is, like, I know there was a survey that was done of your teachers. I haven't seen that data, so I don't know the doing and the feeling part so well. I know the thinking part. So my initial response to that CDC study is that it's just focused on that one circle. It's just focused on the data and the research and the thinking part. But then schools also have to be able to do something, and they also have to be able to incorporate how people feel if we're going to move forward as a community. And so, that could be one place where you start working over the next 9 weeks to see if those concentric circles can meet in a way that works for the community and for yourselves and move forward.
Dr. Dolan, kind of building on a question that Mr. Dow pointed out, we all received the VDH interim guidance. It's on board docs. It's available for the public to look at. And so is it my understanding that our community would be considered parenting substantial community transmission?
Yeah, so Dr. Heron sent me that earlier, and like I said, I'm not at VDH, so I'm not sure how they created those categorizations. I saw that, and I saw the map, but I don't know what they used to highlight who's substantial versus who's not. So I don't really feel very confident in talking about how they labeled that for our area.
I think, I guess, going back to our speakers, we did have one speaker tonight who talked about essentially that we were very low risk, but according to this document and this guidance from VDH, and we don't have someone here tonight to talk about that, but we're not. We're, according to them, we're substantial.
Yeah, we're in the eastern region and the peninsula. According to VDH, we are at substantial risk right now, and if you're at substantial risk, there's certain things that VDH would have been recommending and talking about tonight had they been here. If you're in a substantial community transmission, then you should be limiting in-person instruction. The remote learning should be considered as the primary method of instruction described in phase 1 of the guidance. Basically doing what we're doing now as a starting point while we're still in substantial transmission. I did put some of the thoughts from that document, if Ms. Cox is here to bring them up on the screen, just to give you a sense of it. I didn't really want to do this evening because I'm not the VDH and I'm not the health expert, but just for the public's awareness as to where that information actually came from. If I could bring you the first slide, basically in the document that you received this evening that will be online tomorrow as well, basically if you go back a slide, these are, to this one, these are the dashboard indicators and the questions that the VDH have asked to create to the dashboard. I don't know how they all interact because I'm not in the VDH and I'm not a health expert, but they're looking at incidence rate, outbreaks, rate of visits to the emergency department, confirmed COVID cases, ICU hospitalizations, test percent positivity. They're looking at percent of COVID-19 cases among healthcare workers, percent of hospital beds currently occupied, how many hospitals are reporting trouble requiring personal protective equipment. And if you go to the next slide, basically they're taking all those pieces together to create a composite score for every area of Virginia, from my understanding. And again, I'm not an expert in this at all. And one piece of some of that data is talking about is part of the trend. What do we see? One speaks to the burden of COVID in the region, and the other speaks to the trend in the region. And they use those scores to create 3 levels of community transmission by region: minimal, moderate, and substantial. And currently, we're in that substantial model of transmission. And if you're in that level, which we are right now, which could change over the next several weeks if we do all the right things as a community, then we should be adopting the measures as described in phase guidance for Virginia Schools Phase 1. If you go to the next slide as well, This is what you do, according to VDH, if you're in substantial community transmission. You limit in-person instruction, which we are doing, and we are going to start bringing in some of our most vulnerable students within the first couple of weeks of school. You create exceptions and teleworking for those who are at high risk. And I think currently we have, trying to find my number here, we've 863 staff with teacher certifications, and 283 have actually asked for an accommodation. That's a huge percentage. It's 32% of our workforce have said, if I'm in person instruction tomorrow, I need an accommodation. HR is currently going through those one by one to see how many staff we would actually have on the ground. It talks about some of the other things that we're doing and would do in the context as well, but the key bullet is remote learning should be considered the primary method of instruction as described in Phase 1's guidance for schools if we are experiencing substantial community transmission. And that's where VDH has us right now. And we hope to move out of that, but that's the guidance and that's what we're following to make a really difficult decision to bring, to have students start in a remote learning environment.
And do accommodation requests kind of follow, like I would need to be accommodated if my school, if my community is in this substantial community? And
we really just ask
like,
for accommodations for, if you're going to be in person in front of students, do you need an accommodation? And so we haven't gone through all of those, Ms. Hummels, so some could be very minor and easily accommodated, whether it's a screen or something like that, but some would be more substantial health risks. But we're literally going through, phoning every person right now to check on what kind of accommodations are needed. The other piece, which Dr. Dolan mentioned, which is huge for us right now, is the perception and vulnerability of teachers. We've got a percentage of teachers aged over 60. About 12% of our teachers are in this high-risk category. We've got a percentage of other staff over 60 and above, 25% in the high-risk category over 60. So we have a lot of teachers who are concerned right now because there's so much we just don't know. And the research is emerging daily, and we don't know what it's going to be like. We don't know how quickly it will spread if we bring teachers into the school building. So we're starting with remote learning, but the intention is to build confidence of teachers by starting to bring in small groups of students right away for assessment, bringing in some special education classrooms, bringing in some Bright Beginnings classrooms, and testing all of the mitigation strategies we have in place, operationalizing all of those things and building the confidence of teachers to get back into the classroom. Because it's not just the data, as Dr. Dolan says, it's how you feel. And we have a lot of people that are frightened to come right now, whether that's perceived or real. I can't judge that. I can't judge the person who's running around spreading it with no mask, and I can't judge the person who's terrified, because most of us are kind of in the middle and trying to be cautious and do the right thing to make the right thing happen. So I don't see us as starting completely on path one. We're moving on a very slow, controlled, careful journey to get everybody back in school. We all want them there. There's not a single person in this room that doesn't want that to happen. And I'm sorry I'm not an expert on this. I wish I could tell you how all the data meshes together to get this, but we could maybe do that at the next meeting if that's important to the board.
And looking at this slide, I can tell you that the way that they're meshing it together is similar to what I was saying. They're relying on a lot of different indicators. And they're picking the burden of COVID because that's the prevalence. That's like how much you've got going on. But then they're also, which is really good, looking at the increase in trend. So that's your incidence. So they're looking at both measures of morbidity, incidence, and prevalence, and then creating that aggregate measure of transmission. So I don't know what they did to create a composite score. I don't know if that's actually, if they used statistical analysis to do that or not, but my guess would be yes, because that's terminology that's consistent, a specific statistical technique. But again, the important point is it's not just one data point. They're using a whole bunch.
You have additional questions for Dr. Dolan?
One more, Dr. Dolan. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding that you would advocate for an entire region to align their opening, reopening, path down, path forward, that every school and every division within a region would follow the same alignment. Is
Yeah,
that
so as an epidemiologist, I want there to be consistency across geographic areas. Even big regions, like if Virginia's doing one thing and North Carolina's doing another thing and Maryland's doing another thing, then it's going to be hard to stop the virus. I recognize from a policy standpoint that that's really challenging. But I don't think that we should think of Williamsburg, James City County as its own little geographic area that's not going to be influenced by others, especially when we have data to support the mobility across in and out of the district.
Thank you.
I guess I only have one other question. I mean, you mentioned that there's 5 districts and divisions in Virginia. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay, what comprises the Eastern Division? What areas comprise that?
Oh my goodness, we're going way back. We're going like circa 2005, where I got to pull that information out. So it's
I mean,
not
like the
Richmond.
Eastern Shore. I mean,
Richmond's in the Central District. I'm not going to be able to tell you off the top of my head. It's our area out down towards the beach and around and up. And I can't remember honestly if Eastern Shore should be, but I don't know where it cuts up around Rappahannock, comes back down. I can get you a map and send it to you.
oh, it's okay. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yeah, that was going way back with my knowledge bank.
South Side, Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, Eastern Shore. Yeah, they're here. There's a map. Just Google it.
Okay.
But within that, what's really been most problematic is the Peninsula Health District. Is that right?
So the Peninsula Health District is where we get down to the lowest level of granularity where I'm comfortable with the data.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah.
But I guess to Mr. Dow's point, so when you're looking at the 5 regions, it's the eastern region of Virginia that it has seen an increase or a change, when everyone else's map kind of looks like this. Ours is looking like, oops.
Yeah, for certain indicators.
Then I guess just back to know your number, and I did read that article. Just listening to our speakers tonight, I was just doing quick tally marks, and really we had almost equal numbers. 11 people were adamant we made the wrong decision about starting on path 1, and 12 thanked us for that decision, and another 12 really focused on block schedule. So I think within our community, we're probably exactly split 50-50 on comfort level. And so trying to, just for the community to understand, we're trying to meet everyone's needs, recognizing that we all want our students in classrooms 5 days a week, but we know that that's not safe right now, based on all the varied data points we're looking at.
And I would say, I guess what I want to say is, it's not that we're saying it's not safe right now, it's just saying that we have no conclusive information that points us in a direction yet. And that we have some very good pieces of data that are coming together. The global data, the national data, and the local data give us some information we can work with, but we're still getting together all the rest of the pieces of information that we need to decide if it's all safe for not only our students, but for our staff as well. I like Dr. Heron's approach, the slow-moving train, kind of putting in resources and looking to see how it goes, and then building with more information over time.
Ms. Hummel?
I was just going to say, in 9 weeks, we'll be in a better position to have more data to be able to, with more certainty, make decisions.
Yeah, so I really do think it's coming up with a framework that works for you. So I gave you my thinking, doing, feeling thing, because that's what's popping up for me right now. There is some really good information. We just have to get it in a way that makes sense, that you guys can use it in order to make a decision about moving to a different path. And I mean, I'm very confident that everyone that I have met is committed to trying to do the next best step for the school system, and that using the information they have in a way to make a next step.
Any additional questions for Dr. Dolan? I would just like to thank you for that information and hope that that helps our community understand kind of our thinking process and what informed the superintendent in making the decision to open in Path 1. And it certainly was a tough decision to make. It's not a policy decision, and for that reason, our board did not make this decision. We do believe it's administrative in nature, and we do have a legal opinion to support that. I fully support Dr. Herron opening schools in Path 1. And while deep in my heart, I do want all of our children to be in their classrooms when September 8th rolls around, including my own 2 high schoolers, I know that that's not possible at this time.
So maybe I could just say thank you to Dr. Dolan before she leaves tonight for being here. We value your expertise and your personal investment in WJCC schools as a parent of a rising 4th grader and a PTA member as well. This was way beyond your PTA volunteerism tonight, but we thank you for being an expert, just coming in to share your thoughts with us this evening. Thanks so much indeed.
That was nice to meet you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I should have mentioned also that Carrie is a former student of WJCC schools, so she's one of our former students.
At this point, I know that each of our board members wanted to share their own 2 thoughts about Path 1, but Mr. Walker has additional information.
Okay, whatever the board chooses, Mr. Walker's here to present what Path 1 will look like this year. Staff members have been working long hours to create redesigned, developmentally appropriate experience for students, not the emergency learning that took place in the spring, but learning that closely mirrors our regular classroom and our school day, complete with learning assignments, grading, regular schedule, accountability, and rigor. And Mr. Walker's going to take us through some of that so we really understand what Path 1 looks like at this moment in time as we plan to have a really good launch on September 8th. Mr. Walker, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, and Dr. Herron. This evening, we are pleased to provide you a deeper look at the work taking place to prepare for the new school year. At your last meeting, we shared an overview of our plan, which we are calling Return to Learn, Forward WJCC Schools. As a reminder, through our collaborative efforts with our funding partners, all students will receive a device to access learning during all paths. Students in grades K through 2 will receive a WJCC-issued tablet, and students in grades 3 through 12 will receive a laptop to access electronic classrooms, lessons, assignments, and submit coursework. Those devices have been ordered. If some do not arrive by the very first day of school, we will have backup learning plans available. Enhanced internet connectivity will also be available at libraries, in school parking lots, and neighborhoods through mobile hotspots and partnerships with city and county agencies and local service providers. As you will recall, there are 4 paths to the learning that makes up the Forward WJCC Schools plan. Path 1, remote learning for all. Path 2, limited blended learning, some remote and some at school for some special populations and students in grades pre-K to 3rd. Path 3, blended learning for all. And then Path 4, on-site learning for all. Ultimately, yes, our goal is to be on Path 4, full on-site learning for all students. But after careful consideration of numerous variables, WJCC schools will begin school on September 8th on Path 1, remote learning for all. With that said, our intent is to begin moving along the continuum in a safe and healthy manner and start offering in-person learning for some of our most vulnerable students. So what will remote learning include? Students will participate in new instruction led by WJCC schools teachers. Part of the day will include live or synchronous instruction, and part will include independent work on assignments and activities, asynchronous learning. Live instruction is an important component of student engagement. However, we understand the need for flexibility and realize that in some instances, a student may not be able to log on for all live lessons. Therefore, teachers will record and post the live instruction on their LMS page so that students can watch it later or refer back to it while completing assignments. Attendance, participation in lessons, and completion of assignments will be monitored and graded. Select academic screenings and assessments, such as PALS, kindergarten readiness, and gifted and special education evaluation processes, will occur in person at schools with strict social distancing practices. Individualized education programs and 504 plans will be coordinated with families. Last, teachers will begin returning to their schools and classrooms on a very limited schedule during Path 1 as we safely walk together towards Paths 2 and 3 and ultimately Path 4. On Path 1, students will engage in remote learning and instruction Monday through Thursday, with Friday containing a mixture of learning opportunities such as social emotional learning and supports, online assessments, remediation, enrichment, family-student communication, teacher professional learning, and collaborative planning. Please know that screen time expectations do vary by grade level and suggested recommendations. There are no in-person extracurricular activities or athletics on Path 1. In fact, the VHSL has delayed the start of sports seasons until December. Bus transportation to academic screenings and assessments will be available with social distancing practices in place. Additionally, during Path 1, the Special Education Department is currently developing plans to provide opportunities for in-person instruction to a number of students in our self-contained settings, such as some of our autism, intellectual disability, multiple disability, and some Bright Beginnings classrooms. Also, Project Search, in partnership with Centera Hospital, is preparing to serve students this fall. This is one of our transitional special education programs focused on post-secondary skills. As you can see, remote learning on Path 1 is much different than the emergency at-home learning from the spring. In March, we were in a reactive mode to the sudden closure of schools and working very quickly to put together engaging learning plans to keep students connected to learning. Knowing that, we've had people hard at work planning instruction for the first 9 weeks that could be delivered remotely on Path 1 or modified for blended or on-site learning. There are task forces focused on curriculum, technology, health and safety, and staff development. 3 technology task forces are focusing on laptop and tablet management and distribution, and staff and student technology support. These teams are working on added support for students with technology, including a new branch of our Tech Connect help desk, specifically geared towards students. Looking at the curriculum, there are 3 leveled task forces and 1 division task force for continuity for learning. These 4 task forces have worked since late spring identifying curricular needs, assessment needs, professional development needs, training for students and parents, as well as defined communication requirements. Committees include teachers, administrators, instructional technology, content coordinators, and senior leadership. Recently, this has expanded to include collaboration with the communications and engagement staff to support family engagement and the Parent Academy. The Health and Safety Task Force included division staff, school nurses, and a few local doctors. This group developed the WJCC Schools Health Plan, which was posted today on our website. The Division Professional Development Committee is working to define professional development needs for teachers using guidance from these curriculum task forces. Professional development is also continuing throughout the summer. For example, there are 4 sections of online curriculum writing in Canvas specifically to meet the needs of teachers writing the curriculum. Canvas is an electronic platform where teachers will access curriculum materials for use on their LMS pages. All teachers writing curriculum were required to take the PD on how to use Canvas and applying appropriate learning methodologies to an online course. In fact, 270 teachers enrolled in this course. Additionally, there's a required course for secondary teachers on how to use Canvas and how to understand the management of that tool with instruction, grading, and differentiation. And 157 teachers enrolled and completed this. So here's a look at some of the curriculum work by the numbers. 228 teachers and coordinators are writing curriculum and gathering resources to support remote learning for the first marking period. We have 262 courses being written concurrently. 236 of those are for middle school and high school. To put this in perspective, Virtual Virginia has 118 courses on its website for middle school and high school. There are 25 courses for elementary schools which are integrated and thematic in nature and written for the teacher to use with his or her LMS page. There's also a course for digital citizenship and media literacy being written by middle school librarians. All courses from the program of studies for middle school and high school and all necessary courses for elementary schools are included. During curriculum writing, all teachers have been supported by the special education department, technology integration coaches, gifted, ESL, media specialists, and curriculum coordinators. Additionally, we are receiving copies of all outreach courses provided by Virtual Virginia that we can use, and we already have access to all of the courses from WHRO. Before school begins, as of today, 906 teachers will have set up individual pages in our learning management system that students will access through Student View. We're going to show you an example in just a couple minutes. I think you will agree that teachers and staff have been working hard this summer. They come in each day and give their all so that their peers will have everything they need for online learning and so that students will have access to rigorous coursework for the new school year. That's not enough. Staff is simultaneously standing up the WJCC Virtual Academy, family choice for year-long online learning. Students who participate in the Virtual Academy will learn online regardless of the path the school division is on. Courses will be taught by WJCC schools teachers and will include live set times for instruction, synchronous, and completion of independent work and activities. The levels of synchronous and asynchronous learning will vary by course and grade level. For this option, parents and students were asked to make a year-long commitment to the WJCC Virtual Learning Academy. We know that not every student will be successful in a completely 100% online format. In those instances, students will be able to opt out for the second semester. Approximately 3,000 students, or 25% of our total student enrollment, are signed up for the WJCC Virtual Learning Academy. Whether part of the WJCC Virtual Academy or remote learning on Path 1, students will access and use Student View as the portal to real-time information about assignments, live instructions, schedules, grades, and more. And as we wrap up tonight, we thought it would be helpful for you to see what students will see and experience when they sign in to Student View. We'd like for you to take a look from the student's perspective.
This is a brief overview of what the Student View account will look like this fall. This is just a sample to give you a quick picture of the structure that every core teacher will use to support instruction. When a student logs into their Student View account, they will click on their class website menu on the left. To go to the class that you want to see, click on the drop-down menu at the top of the page and select the course that you want to go to. All teachers will have a Welcome tab with all of the overview information that would be helpful throughout the school year. For example, there is an introduction page, a rules and procedures page, and a calendar. Pages can contain videos, links, graphics, text, files. The content will be located on the Weeks tabs. Tabs will be added by Monday morning for the week. Each tab will have the school day and date listed. The structure will have an informational section at the top of the page, and then the curriculum materials will be below. This example has a to-do list, right column. There'll be a link to the Centers Teachers class for the day, along with other daily information. I hope this overview provided a meaningful glimpse at how the curriculum will appear.
So Student View will be a critical tool as we transition between paths. It is the clearinghouse for information, assignments, and learning materials, as well as Canvas for grades 6 through 12. Similarly, family access to Parent View is essential. This is where families can monitor student attendance, participation, grades, and receive announcements. Most parents and guardians already have a Parent View account. If they do not, parents can register on the school division website and are encouraged to do so as soon as possible. Now that we know we will be starting the school year on Path 1, schools will be putting together virtual open houses and virtual welcome events. Families will continue to receive notification about important events via phone calls, emails, and text messages. Information will also be posted online and on social media. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to share some of the planning and the updates for the start of the school year. We look forward to bringing more information to you at the next school board meeting on the virtual academy, student support systems, and parent resources. And at this time, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sure. One of the callers said that her kids were in daycare from 5. So is there a way, you said some things were synchronous, but is there a way for the working parents that have their kids in daycare to be able to do their assignments in the evening and catch up that way? I'm just trying,
Absolutely. We realized that we needed to have flexibility for all of our families, very unique situations happening, and that's why teachers will record their lessons. They have that ability through their LMS page to do that, and that way it will allow families and students to access it whenever they can get to it at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. On the topic of parents, I am incredibly concerned about those parents that want to do well by their children. They won't have any choice within these 9 weeks if it goes 9 weeks, and they're going to have to do their very best to, sit with their children and help them not only figure out this dashboard and learning remotely, but, for that first grader, how do you get to 5 from 2 plus 3, right? Very simple example, but it gets a little bit more complicated for those older grades, and so I'm really concerned about that for our parents. Have we considered and can we consider I know that Parent View is available to them. I know that our counselors are available to them. But are there any other resources we've looked at that we can bolster, I guess, a parent's confidence to go and do this very heavy task over these several weeks?
Yes, that's a good question. I do know that we will be looking forward to working with media and communication as we bolster the Parent Academy and some of those parent resources through this process. And Fox, I don't know if you add to that.
Yes, we have identified some resources that we're putting together. Our goal is to create a parent toolbox that includes some tutorial videos, some links to resources that support curriculum that are the at-home supports. Many of the courses that we have being developed now, there are some parent components that we can create for parents. We always try to look at it at you use the math example. How do you support your child learning a style of math that you didn't learn?
Yeah.
And so new math is now old math, so newer math. And so we're looking at some of those very common questions and resources that parents might need and developing a toolbox for them. And that will be launched at the beginning of the school year.
That's exactly what I'm asking for. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Cook?
I just have a question about the View being used as a clearinghouse. And I hear loud and clear the difference between last year, which was an emergency situation, and now. But just, so will it be truly a clearinghouse, or will kids be able to access everything through View, including connections to Canvas, or will kids have to navigate some things being on View, some things being on Canvas, some things being on Teams? Because for that, on top of, in high school, on top of 8 active classes, might just push organizationally challenged people over the edge.
So that's a great question, and we heard that feedback. View will be the landing page for the division K through 12, so that's why we're encouraging families to set up that Parent View account and a Student View account that is specific to the student. At the secondary level, we will still launch. Everything will come from the View account, and then we'll launch to, in secondary schools, to Canvas, which will store instructional. Dr. Worley, add anything additional to it.
I would just add that most of the work for secondary will be done in Canvas. They'll log in and they'll have links through View. For secondary, View will be very much like a teacher business card of sorts, where announcements and access to anything about the class, but we're really going to teach the students to navigate Canvas. So, and those things will be working to make sure they're the same across every content. So it looks familiar, so students, it doesn't look a whole lot different for different content. We're that out to our teachers so that they're set up similar. Realize that it's going to be challenging with all these new things possible by having a lot of continuity.
It's been described a little bit like going into the main platform and then reaching for some information from a library and bringing it across to View at the elementary level. So literally there's a library of resources for every single subject and grade that you then pull and you land on your View page. That's certainly at the elementary level, from my understanding.
And since you're here, we did hear from several parents about 8 classes versus 4 classes. So just out of respect for the people who called in, if you could just speak to that and your plans for next year and, kind of affirm that, that would be great.
As you know, we're making the transition to year-long courses, and it's when we made the decision to go that way, we collected a lot of data from surrounding divisions and obviously worked with a group to give us information. And we think that students having access to that material for a year-long basis is the best for their learning. And also, we learned last year with, the abrupt closure of school, that our students struggled a little bit with only having 7 weeks access to their teachers before we didn't come back to in-person learning again. So that was also a challenge. While we realized that 8 classes at a time are going to be a little different, it's a change, and with change and all the other change that's coming, that makes it a little harder. But our teachers and our staff are putting in lots of strategies and things to help our students with consistency, with pages looking similar, with time, where we'll be working with our students and realizing that not only is it hard for them to navigate 8 courses, but there's other challenges we know that are probably going on due to situations, family situations. So our teachers are going to work with them. We're going to set expectations and be available and be creative and be able to support them through that.
Just affirming, students will be taking 8 classes. High school students will be taking 8 classes in the fall. Is
Yes,
that
their
correct?
schedule's set up for 8 courses.
That decision has been made, and it's final.
I believe so. I think one of the challenging things, if a student was to take 6 classes, then we move into a different path, then the time in school becomes very complicated, because if they decide not to continue with a class that's right in the middle of the day, what does that student do in the middle of the day? So we've got to look at now and our journey along the continuum to have every student in school. So we're still looking at it, honestly, and trying to figure out if there's a way for a student to take less than 8 classes in the year.
I will say that we are looking at those needs, especially for upperclassmen and seniors. For instance, if there's a student that was on a track to graduate early or early college, or the 8 classes just wasn't working and a student is ready to move on, we are going to consider, we're working with counselors to look at what the needs of our students are for upperclassmen. And of course, we're committed to making sure that they all get the courses that they need for graduation through this change.
Just for those people who called in, there will be 8 classes available. There are cases in which some students may not be taking all 8, but that decision is final, and it will not be a 4 by 4 semester. Okay.
Correct,
Thank you.
correct.
Ms. Hummel and then Ms. Young.
Is there any difference for parents that are doing a virtual learning, or, students who are doing the virtual learning versus the path one, with regard to the number of classes that they have to take, or the order in which they're taking classes? Is there some flexibility there that's in one model versus the other?
So purposely for the virtual academy, that's a result of the family choice, we're setting that up very similar to the remote learning in the past, because we know that we're giving students the opportunity to opt out, and we're making sure the pacing is the same in case they do transition back. Now, it gets a little confusing because there are other courses that students take online in addition to regular learning that are virtual too, that are not a part of this, and there's some flexibility in those. But for this virtual academy, as a result of a family choice, they're aligned with the path learning.
Ms. Young?
I just had a question about, you mentioned early college. In the past, we've been able to have students work with Thomas Nelson. Is that still going to be an option during this coming school year?
Yes, ma'am.
And Thomas Nelson is, they're developing coursework similar to what you're developing for our high school students?
Yes, ma'am. The plans that we had in place for early college are still there, and we're collaborating with Thomas Nelson, as well as with the courses that they are planning to roll out in career and tech as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Kelly?
This is going to kind of jump all over the place because a whole bunch of my questions, but that's okay. So we're having live teacher-led classes. That didn't work out so well for Fairfax. Are we on board to have enough bandwidth to manage that in our system?
Yes, we have the bandwidth to manage it, and we also, Zoom, that was an issue for Fairfax, has actually been now embedded in our management system, so it's an internal product, and we get to use that as part of parent and student view.
That's said, and civil Fairfax. One of the things with the live teacher-led and with the, with the virtual is the monitoring of the teachers and making sure teachers are meeting the expectations and delivering the learning to our kids that we should expect them to be at this point. How are we going to do that monitoring, and how are we going to make sure we're setting the expectations for all the teachers that they're meeting the standard that we want them to meet?
That's absolutely a part of our discussion in our professional development with our principals and administrators, and I don't know if Mark wants to add to this as well, but we are expecting our leaders to participate in classroom observations, to log on to Zoom meetings, to participate in CTT meetings, LC meetings, monitor progress, to look at assessment results, and to really get, pull their sleeves up and strategize with teachers about how to help these students be successful in this environment.
That's a pretty important part of all this.
Yes.
Is making sure that our teachers are doing what our expectations are, that they're meeting our students.
Mr. Kelly, if I could add to that as well, we're actually pulling a group, that's one of our work groups this week, is actually to delineate those teacher expectations really, really clearly, so there's no misunderstanding of what's expected of everybody going into the first 9 weeks.
Yeah, because those are tough conversations to have with a teacher, that you're not meeting expectations, but have teachers that don't. It reflects poorly on the entire system, and it reflects poorly on those teachers that are actually putting in that effort. And so, I think it's important that we hold them to standards and expectations. So have we made the decision that we're going to open up in phase 1, or that we're going to open up in phase 1 for 9 weeks?
We've made the decision to open up in phase 1 for 9 weeks, but we're already stepping into pieces of path 2 already as we open. So we're not on path 2, we're not on path 1, but we're actually moving slowly and carefully off path 1 and into pieces of path 2 from the beginning.
If I understand this correctly, so for those students that we have that need a little bit more work, our special ed kids, our English language learners, some of those other kids that are falling behind, kids that need to make up, we're going to bring them in for small group.
That's correct, especially K through 2. We're bringing, Mr. Walker can speak to this, we're bringing all those students in for assessments right at the beginning to assess what they've missed in terms of learning, so we can actually redirect the teaching. You want to speak to that, Mr. Walker, as well, please?
There's certain state assessments that are still required, such as PALS and VKRP, which is the kindergarten readiness piece. And we have worked on a plan with developing how we will utilize a testing team across the division, as well as teacher assistants, and all practicing health, safety, mitigation strategies. But in order to get those students in so that we can collect that data and know exactly where to begin and how to start and meet in. Planning is happening right now for some of our most vulnerable students, such as in our self-contained classrooms, some of our autism, so not all, but some, was starting, I believe Dr. Herron made mention of we need to crawl before we walk and walk before we run, and we want to do that carefully and safely and accurately.
And that's an important transition as we go from phase 1 to phase 2, to make sure that we do that well, that our teachers get more comfortable with it, that they tell a good story to other teachers, and that that we're moving forward there. Because we can't just, particularly when we're going from phase 1 to phase 2, teachers need time to prep, and so it's going to be interesting to see how we transition from the phase 1 to the phase 2. I'm assuming we're going to phase 2. So it's going to be interesting to see how we transition there to get those teachers prepared for classroom instruction and have classes.
And if I could add to that as well, Mr. Kelly, we're working with principals to create what a teacher schedule would look like, even in the first 9 weeks, that the teachers would be sometime in the building. Because if teachers are never in the building, we're never going to build that confidence in the strategies that are in place. And so the teachers won't be teaching remotely from home every single day, because otherwise we're not going to build we're not going to walk through that fear if we don't very carefully bring teachers into the building as well. So that's part of how we're trying to walk through and test everything's in place and as safe as possible.
Right, and I understand the health plans have been put on the website, and I'm kind of interested in reading those and seeing what kind of actions we're taking in the classroom as far as separating kids and what precautions we're going through there to mitigate those risks as well. Transitioning over to Wi-Fi access, I understand the Wi-Fi access in our parking lots. I understand the Wi-Fi access in our public libraries. I'm very interested in our Wi-Fi access out in the communities and our outreach to the communities. And I wonder what kind of stress tests we're doing to see how that works and how broad of a reach that is. Because to ask parents to drive to a parking lot, whether it be a school or a public library, is kind of a stretch. I'm sure there'll be those that do it. Having it reach into their apartments and their houses, I think, is more important. So I'm kind of interested to see what level we're doing that and how broad that reach is going to be.
Yeah, we'll bring, Mr. Lanners maybe bring some of that information to the next board meeting. We've several things going on. We're working with the county, they're working with Cox, they're building some more lines for us. We've got about 10 buses ready to go with access points on them to go into neighbourhoods that are not reached, but they're literally have been doing a heat map to try to figure out what students don't have access, and sometimes it's not just access, it's actually the cost for actually getting on, and Mr. Lanners is also pursuing a new agreement that's coming out for families at a minimal cost to have access to the internet as well. But he's the master of those details, and we'll bring them to you next time.
I think I find it interesting that 25% of our students have signed up for the virtual academy. I think that's kind of a telling statistic of what the temperature of the community is right now when that many that are signed up for virtual for at least the first semester and probably all year, no matter which phases we go into. Is there a distribution of that? Is it K through 12? Is it mostly high school? Do we have a kind of a graph that shows us where we are as far as?
We can bring you that. Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
I can give you the rough numbers, raw numbers. Last count, we had about 1,300 elementary students.
K through 5, 13.
And that was above all schools, across all schools as well.
Across all schools, all grade levels.
Right. So when they do that, they're I guess at least for the semester, they're not necessarily associated with the school. They are in that virtual.
They're still connected to their home school because if we get to the point where, for instance, in secondary, VHSL and athletics and extracurricular, students will still be able to participate. I want students to still be included in the yearbook and opportunities like that, but they will be living in that virtual
Brand new world, right? And then the last thing I have right at the moment is kindergarten registration. How is that going this time of year?
Very slowly, and Mr. Walker's our expert on that one as well.
So publicly, kindergarten registration, we need to enroll. Numbers are definitely not what they were at this point last year, and understandably so with everything going on. We've already been communicating and talking about different pieces that we can put together, such as registration pop-up events, us going into communities and areas where we know we need to go and to assist families, whether that be on a bus with Wi-Fi access points, similar to our wireless on wheels concept, and PPE equipment and devices to assist families. Ready to do that. So conversations have started and on it.
Good, because it's always a struggle to get, we always have a bunch of kids that show up the first week, and it's just going to be interesting to see how that works out this year with all the other things that are going on. So the other tough conversation to have in addition to expectations for teachers and, monitoring their meeting our standard, is making sure that everybody on our payroll is actually getting paid for a day's work. And, do we anticipate, I'll say the word in the public now, do we anticipate any furloughs of folks that in our virtual environment for the first 9 weeks that may not have a role that they can play, or how are we managing that so that we can ensure that we're good stewards of the taxpayers' money?
We're actually going through position by position with HR in a group just last week, and we'll meet again this week with the operations group. The majority of our staff will definitely have a role to play. For example, bus drivers, bringing students to assessments, special ed bus drivers, special bus aides will all be involved in bringing students to school. We're literally going through matching jobs to actual people right now for those who maybe don't obviously have a role to play. Even in the virtual academy, there's going to be a huge need for staff to be shifted to there, even receptionists and people like that, to monitor attendance, because that is a huge thing we haven't looked at before in a totally virtual world. And so we're trying to define everything, and we'll bring you more information when we're ready.
Because we need to make sure that we're assuring the taxpayer in James City County and Williamsburg that we are being good stewards of their money, that we are actually employing people to do work that furthers the teaching and learning of our students, and that furthers our school system. So I think that's
One other piece we're already doing as we go through each position, if there are any open positions or positions that come open right now where they don't have a defined role, then we're not filling those positions. So we'll have an update for that for the board as well, just in terms of unfilled positions that we would then seek to fill before we move into the next 9 weeks. For example, bus drivers, we've got several more unfilled positions right now that we won't fill, but it takes about 5 weeks to hire a bus driver.
right.
From start to finish with the training and everything else. And they're difficult to find in the first place, but we are holding off on some of those positions that are currently open. So really trying to look through it and be very careful with what we're doing.
Thank you.
On the topic of tough questions, tough conversations, I was watching the Board of Supervisors last week, and they had meaningful conversation about daycares in our schools that are closed, Rec Connect being one of them. I wonder if you could speak to that, how that's acceptable for them, not for us, not for our teachers. That was the crux of the conversation.
Basically, the numbers in Rec Connect are small with a greater number of staff. I don't know exactly what mitigation strategies they have in place, but I know the conversation surrounded childcare. And I know we're working very closely with the staff at the county to try to partner with them and like that. I believe the teacher in a classroom is a very different piece, where you're in a classroom with a significant number of students for many hours a day in close contact, and it's a little bit different to the Rec and Connect.
So they do it differently. There's less risk for.
Actually haven't been at Rec and Connect, so I couldn't even describe exactly what they do, so I can certainly ask more questions and find out.
Ms. Young?
I have been. I went last week to WISC, over to the Williamsburg Sports Complex, because they've had about 100 students all summer at WISC going to childcare. And they basically, one of the things that's why I support the Path 3 for the school board is because when we initially talked about that, we talked about it being like a bubble, where these kids would stay in that little bubble, and that's basically what these kids are doing. They have the same teacher, they work with the same people. There's, when I talked to the director, he said there can be up to 22, by Virginia mandate, there can be up to 22 people within a group. that includes the adults, and there's 2 adults to each group. And he says that, you know, they move from group to group, they clean up before they move, and I was very impressed, and so that's that gave me a great deal of hope for our school division also, that could work for us also.
Additional comments or questions?
Good. I just wanted to say, I think one of our speakers called in today to say something about, you know, the teachers didn't have as much work to do in this online environment, and I just really want to say that I think it is twice as much work for I mean, if you think about all of our teachers and what they're having to do, a lot of them, especially, you know, you get into a groove. You've been teaching the same way, and you've been doing it for a long time, and you're really, really good at it in one modality, and then all of a sudden, everyone's throwing a whole entire new way of teaching. So I think our staff and our teachers are doing amazing work at trying to react, like they had to react in the spring, but now to actually thoughtfully and have the time to, like you said, develop all these work plans, build all these courses. And I just want the community to know this is in no way, shape, or form easier for any of our staff. This is so hard and takes so long and takes so much more people. And I just think there needs to be a recognition of the amount of work and effort that is going transition to the virtual academies, which if you're saying 700 middle school, that is the size of our largest middle school. I mean, the 1,600 elementary, 1,600. 1,300, that's like 2.5 of our elementary
Correct.
schools. So I think all of us need to kind of think in those terms that we are standing up entirely new organizations, ways of teaching. And I just want to say thank you to all the teachers, the curriculum coordinators, and all of you for just working with this pandemic and making the hard choices. So, not easy.
I know every board member wants to make comments to the decision to open a Path 1, but I just had a couple other questions going back to our children who have IEPs or 504s, recognizing that we might use an individualized approach, particularly at the secondary level, and we'll probably have to modify 504s and IEPs. And so when can those families, one of our callers tonight talked about his student with an IEP, when will those families be reached out to have a conversation about things that can be done to meet the individual needs of students who have IEPs and 504s with regard to course load particularly?
Know that planning is happening right now. Difficult for me to give an exact date or time on that piece. I think once they have ironed out some of those details in a very safe manner, that we feel we can move forward and try that in a very controlled way, families should expect communication before school starts.
So will it be like their child's guidance counselor will call them and say, hey, we look at your schedule? Or do families need to reach out to guidance counselors and say, we need to relook at my son or daughter's IEP or 504?
I believe Ms. Bourgeois will be able to answer that more effectively because she's involved with Dr. Burrow and her staff. But my understanding is that the case manager will be probably the one that'll reach out to the parent. I don't know the timeline for that, but we can certainly ask Dr. Burrow and get that information for you.
Great, thank you. So maybe I will just do a round robin and just let each board member share your thoughts on, we've done that, but we'll just do one more opportunity to share your thoughts on the superintendent's decision.
Oh, I already did my my speech. I think it's a very difficult task, and the choices that you're making are gut-wrenching because no one's happy, right? I mean, no one is happy. This is not optimal for anyone, and yet I think we are doing really heroic efforts to try our best to create in this environment the best that we can possibly provide for our children. So I want to just say I support you, Dr. Heron. I support the administration. I know that you don't take any of these lightly. I know that you're reaching out to the Virginia Department of Health and the surrounding areas, and you're having to balance the needs of so many different constituents. So, got my support.
Thank you, Julie. And Ms. Surza, could you just, for the minutes, record just board members' support? Kelly?
Yeah, so I sat down this afternoon and wrote a bunch of stuff, and I don't want to read it all because we don't have time for that. But I'm going to try to paraphrase it as best I could. There's two things that I really want to talk about. One thing is the board voting on which path we're going forward, and the other one is what path that we're taking. We have a policy, EBCD, which says that the superintendent or his or her designee may order the closing, the delay in opening, or the early dismissal of any of all schools in order to protect the safety and welfare of the students and staff. Now, when we voted on that, I saw it was adopted in 10. I was here when we voted on it in 10, and then we redid it again in 19. I'm sure we had visions of hurricanes. Funny we should say that, right? Hurricanes and snow in our minds, and not pandemics. We don't have a lot of policies for pandemics, and so we look at that as being an administrative operational decision and not a policy decision. And then people are like, well, it's a big decision, so the school board should vote on it. Just because it's a big decision doesn't mean it's in our purview. A lot of other school boards are voting on it. Some school systems have board members who are coming up with their own plan, which I guess they're going to try to force the superintendent to implement. And so it kind of goes down the path of chaos there for me. The other thing too is, we had one board last week that voted to go down one path, and then they had a special meeting yesterday to go back to a different path. And so what I want as we're going through this issue is that the superintendent to only be thinking about the safety of students and staff and the community, and not to worry about stepping on board members' toes and what does the board think, and be kind of worried about that. I just want our superintendent to be thinking about those issues and not us. And so March 13th, Dr. Heron made a decision to be the first school system to close in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And ahead of the governor, ahead of everybody, I think she's done a great job of keeping us informed. I think she's talked to each of us and has our opinions and understands where we want to go and where we think it should be. I don't know that we all necessarily agree with this, but I think we've had the opportunity to have that discussion, so I don't know that we necessarily need to vote. I think she's been very thoughtful, very informed in her decisions and actions, and she certainly has my full support on that. As far as where I want to open up school, I want to open up school 5 days a week. I want kids in classes. I want extracurricular activities. I want marching bands. I want theaters. I want all those things that we took for granted last year and maybe even 6 months ago. That's just not what we can do here. There are times when I don't mind being the leading edge of the spear. There are times where I am willing to take the risk of being the bleeding edge of the spear. This is not that time. There's so much that we don't know right now. There's so much we don't know about the virus and how it reacts, and we don't know why kids potentially don't get it as bad as others. We don't know why they don't give it. And so there's a lot of risk there, and there's a lot of risk there that I'm not willing to put on students and staff and other members of the community. So I don't mind being a trailblazer, but I don't want to put the health and safety of 11,000 students, 1,500 or so staff members. I'm just not there. I know that there are some schools and there are some school systems that are there and that they are going out and in opening class, we're going to start doing some some small group stuff and developing some strategies for getting back into school. God, I want everybody to be successful. I want to learn from that. This is not a time where I feel that we need to be trailblazing. This is a time where I think that we need to kind of learn lessons from other school systems and other large organizations and how they react to it, and develop the confidence. I've heard from several teachers who are scared. They are scared to go to school. They are scared to be with their kids. And I get that. And, as, not sure if it's Dr. Dolan, but as Ms. Dolan said today, she, there's that, the comfort level of the employees and where they are on that spectrum. The teachers have to come through that. They're going to have to see that, that we're going to live with this virus. We can see that we can put the mitigations and that we can make strides. I personally don't think that a vaccine is going to make this go away. I don't think we're going to have a vaccine on Monday and be done with it by Friday. This is going to be with us for a long time. So I certainly understand the angst of our parents. I mean, I understand, you're trying to work, you're trying to provide for your family, you're trying to ensure that your children get educated. I certainly understand that angst. I am just not in the point where I'm willing to risk the health and safety of staff and children. And I just don't think that those two things balance. So I am certainly in favor of starting 9 weeks virtually, the first 9 weeks virtually. I want to see us transition as soon as we can down to the phase 2 into the phase 3. I want to see our teachers have more confidence in that and develop the faith and the confidence in that. Now, does that mean that we are not going to have any cases? This is going to be with us. We're going to have cases. We're going to have teachers, and we're going to have staff, and we just need to have protocols in place and understand what those protocols are going to be, follow those protocols, and mitigate the risks associated with this, because it's going to be here for a while. So at the end of the day, I fully support Dr. Herron and her thought process and her decision to start school the way she has. And I do want to move off of that to other paths as soon as possible. So,
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too prepared some remarks that I'm going to try to also paraphrase, but they're very similar to Mr. Kelly's. And just to say personally, I desperately want my children to return to school as soon as possible. I want them to take their classes in person. I want them to be with their friends. I want them to participate in athletics. I also want selfishly to be able to work my day job without having to worry about the logistics of getting them online and helping them figure out how to navigate the new system. I also desperately want our economy to open back up because the city and county heavily rely on tourism and sales tax to fund our budget. And we've already had a tough budget this year. Next year, I fear, is going to be even worse. Williamsburg and James City County have been identified as among Virginia's most vulnerable areas when it comes to the economic fallout of this pandemic. But my personal wishes can't overshadow my role as a board member, in which I must think about nearly 12,000 students and not just my two. And I also have to think about nearly 2,000 employees, nearly 14,000 people and their families. We're one of this community's largest employers, and that's a big, big deal. So I think I need to also be keenly aware of my specific role as a board member, which is to work with all of you to hire a superintendent, adopt an annual budget, which is our biggest policy document, and adopt our, nearly 300 policies. So with that in mind, it's my role to allow Dr. Herron to do her job and stay out of the way. And Jim already read the policy, which clearly states this is in her purview. So he's dead on that this is not our job to vote on. It's our job, again, to stay out of her way. And I support her decision to start the school year in Path 1, and I have total faith that she'll navigate us safely and eventually to Path 4, but I won't push her to get there any sooner than she thinks. Just won't do it. She's listening to public health experts and consulting with members of the community, and she's come to this reluctant conclusion that the failure to contain the novel coronavirus, makes it unwise to return children to school at this time, because in-person learning could drive mobility of the virus further into our community, and that's a bad thing. It was a wrenching process. We talked to her often, and we know how much she deliberated to make this decision. There are strong feelings on both sides, and no one, not even those who favor remote learning, view this as could argue that virtual learning is a satisfactory replacement for in-person learning. Children, particularly those that we're worried about most, those from at-risk populations, suffer academically, and there are social and health benefits when children interact with each other and with their teachers in person, and we know that, not to mention the hardships on the working families that we heard from today in the calls. So, so for those of you who disagree with Dr. Herron's decision, I hear you, I respect you, I know you're frustrated, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, but I also ask for your understanding. As Mr. Kelly stated at our last meeting, we all need to pitch in right now. We need to give each other grace. We need to follow rules by wearing our masks and keeping contact to a minimum. And none of this is perfect, it's not going to happen as soon as we like, but I think we just need to support each other and know that we will open as soon as it's reasonable to do so. Mr. Dow read from the CDC website, and I just want to read really quickly a piece of the American Academy of Pediatrics letter in which they stated a desire to get students in person learning as possible. But I'm going to pull one paragraph from that, which says, returning to school is important for the healthy development and well-being of children, but we must pursue reopening in a way that is safe for all students, teachers, and staff. Science should drive the decision-making on safely reopening schools. Public health agencies must make recommendations based on evidence, not politics. We should leave it to the health experts to tell us when the best time is to open public school buildings, and listen to educators and administrators to shape how we do it. So I'm a big fan of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I wish we would follow their advice on when to open high schools, which is no sooner than 8:30. But we don't do that, but I just wanted to call that letter out because they do recommend in person, but they also have that caveat that as soon as it's safe to do so. So with that, I want to just express a concern about equity. With the nearly 3,000 students that have elected to go virtual for the year. If it is, I know they're still counted as with their school, but I'd like to know the demographics of that population and whether that's going to further drive inequity in our school division. So when we do start to return in person, whether our schools are going to be more at risk than they were before because of the demographics of the population that decided to stay home. And as a result, I don't know if it's possible to look at per pupil spending on that, from that lens as well. But I definitely want to know the demographics of that population if that's possible. I also wanted to comment on childcare. I can't speak to the differences in how students or kids are close to each other or adults in pods or any of that, but I can tell you that childcare, and Mr. Carnifax and Ms. Vinroot at the James City County Board of Supervisors meeting stated this very clearly. Childcare can limit their numbers. They can say we can take 30 and end it at that. We cannot do that. We have to take every student who comes. So however we decide to open, if we think 20 are coming and 50 come, we can't turn them away. So that is a very big difference between daycare and our schools. I agree with Mr. Kelly, and I think every month when we have our financial report, I'll be asking about what you talked about, Dr. Herron, and just our jobs and making sure that everybody's meaningfully engaged in their work. But I'd also like to understand that, or learn more about the cost of furloughing, because that's, as you said, it takes 5 weeks to bring a school bus driver on. So kind of having employees in and out isn't necessarily cost-effective use of taxpayer dollars either. So I'd like to understand that a little bit. So I think all I have for now. But the demographics of the virtual academy is very important to me.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Thank you. Ms. Young?
Just going back over what we've talked about today before I started on my comments, I just would really like maybe to make sure that at one of our board meetings that you talked about Mr. Landers coming and talking about how students are going to have access to the Wi-Fi. I would like a lot more information on that. And then I'd also like to know, and I see you sitting there, that our parents are going to be notified which areas and at what times this is going to be available. Is that correct? Because that's very concerning to me, because if we're going to have our students doing online learning, then we need to make sure that they have access. The other thing is, which Mr. Kelly touched on, is I'd like to know more about what we're doing about registration for our little kindergartners, because we can't have them all showing up the first day of school thinking that school is in session, because that just isn't so. And I guess the one thing that I really appreciated today was talking about flexibility, because I think our superintendent is a master at that. So with that, I'm just going to talk about, first of all, my feeling about our teachers. And I believe our teachers are part of that. You see those signs that say that here are heroes. Well, I believe our teachers are part of that. And I want them to know that I am a strong supporter of our teachers. I'm very proud of our staff. Our staff, I think, has come through a very difficult period of time. I mean, it wasn't ideal in the spring. It won't be ideal now. Even with all of the amazing attempts that are being, all of the efforts and energies and our staff working throughout the summer to make sure that things are going to come off this fall, is still a short period of time. If you understand how curriculums are developed, and those of us that we're all nodding, those of us that are in education, it takes years to develop, and we're asking a school division to come up with something that's going to work for everybody in a matter of months. And again, if our superintendent she should be given not only an Academy Award, she should be given a trophy, she'd be given all kinds of kudos, because I have complete confidence in Dr. Herron. I have ever since she's been hired. And so us beginning in virtual learning is not my choice. I mentioned that earlier. I do believe after the last presentation where we could have begun in phase 3, I did feel very confident about that, especially with the idea that people would be kind of in this bubble and they would only work with those kids, and teachers would only work with their compatriots. And that I still very much would like to see that happen. But I would like her to have the flexibility to start where she needs to start. And so reluctantly, I support her, because I believe that she always operates, and having known her for 4 years, I know that she always operates with the best of intentions, and that she always is concerned about individuals. And because of that, I will support her. And the one thing that was mentioned is safety. Probably one of my hue and cries is I'm always concerned about the safety and security of students. That not only applies to our resource officers in our school, but it also applies in this, because our safety of our kids is tantamount, and the security of our teachers is tantamount. And being in that group of over 60, I can understand some of the fear, but eventually we're going to have to get past that. And I think the idea of working into it slowly, helping teachers develop confidence, is going to do that. Fear is a very powerful driver for all of us. And we don't have a crystal ball right now. We don't know what's going to happen. As Mr. Kelly said, this isn't going to stop COVID. And it's not going to stop any pandemic, but we have to move forward, and our students deserve the best education. So I'm hoping that by the end of the 9 weeks, that maybe we'll be into the next path, and we'll be moving forward so that our students can be in school. To our community, I know I've talked to many parents, and I know people aren't happy about the decision, but somebody has to make the decision. Decision's been made, and so we need to move forward and be supportive. I do have a lot of concern about single parents. We already have many families or parents from working 2 jobs, many parents. And some of us are hanging on by you can just see them with their little fingernails hanging on. And this is a tourist community, and we're going to be suffering. And that goes back to my concern about the budget. This year's been awful. I think next year is going to be more awful. I don't want to say the word horrible, but I think that's going to be aptly apply. I am concerned about our community as a whole and the well-being. I'd like to see kids back in school because that is a sense of normalcy. When buses are going through the community in the morning, that creates that sense of normalcy, which we don't have right now. So moving forward, I'd really, again, like to see us in phase 3 as soon as possible, and phase 4 even faster after that. But I've felt very conflicted and overwhelmed, but I feel a little bit more secure after tonight. So that's all the comments I have, Madam Chair. I do want to again say that we have a superintendent who has always taken the best interest of people, and I believe she will continue to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mr. Dow?
So, thank you. I was one of those few that was excited, not the few, one of the many that was really excited about opening in Path 3. I would say that I'm one of the few that would still like to see us opening in Path 3, although I understand the arguments in the decision-making process to open in Path 1. I get it. You talked about the policy. I agree with the policy. I agree that it was suitable for a time period, that it wasn't, as you put, Mr. Kelly, that it wasn't, and I don't mean to speak to you, but just as you put, that it wasn't with this scenario in mind, right, a pandemic. I believe that's what we have a policy committee for. You know, we learn things. We learn about what we've experienced here, what works and what doesn't, what we can do better. We hand it off to a policy committee, maybe perhaps next year, and we say, you know what, this was a lot. This was a big decision to put on one individual. Regardless of how extraordinarily talented that superintendent is, you know, this did become political for a lot of people in this community. And Dr. Herron is not a political figure, right? We do have elected and appointed individuals in this room that I believe, if policy had permitted, should have shouldered the responsibility. And I believe that policy committee can take a look and examine what we've learned in this and say, you know what, we still agree that this is an administrative decision. We're going to offer better guidance when this situation comes up, and we're not going to shackle her when she needs to roll back or roll forward. But the body that appointed or elected by the community members that are calling us and saying, what is the board? What is the board? What is the board? Right? And I'm not willing to say, well, it wasn't me. I'm not willing to say it was Dr. Herron, because it was us. And so we do collectively say that we support Dr. Herron. We do. But at the same time, I believe this board needs to take a little bit more responsibility on issues as large as this, because we've not seen this, as Ms. Cook mentioned earlier, we've not seen something at this scale before. That being said, I understand moving to Path 1. The challenge I have with it is exactly what Dr. Dillon stated earlier, and I quote her. She says, it's not that it's not safe, and in block quotes I'd say, to return to school. We just don't know because the data isn't there. That really stuck out to me, because we're seeing data across the continuum, you know, what's true and what's not, you know, and we heard it from a professional here. We probably would have heard it from 2 others had they been available to us, that the data just isn't there. It's just not. And so I bring that to bear because what I'd like to see, because we are on this Path 1 trajectory, is that we not allow ourselves to be restricted or constricted to 9 weeks. That we really take a look, because I'm looking at it right now, thanks to Dr. Dillon, we can drill down to what our community looks like and our response. Our unique response. It is a unique response. If it wasn't a unique response, they wouldn't give us each locality's breakdown for confirmed cases. It is a unique response. And if we see things emerge in a more drastic way, then we adjust. I think that shackling us to 9 weeks is going to be not only exhaustive to certain parents that really are meaningful and they want the best for their children, but we are going to lose so many underprivileged, underrepresented students in our communities. Just will. And that really burdens my heart, as it does for every single person in this room. I think that if we can shorten that using data that's available to us and say, you know what, we're going to roll this back to 4 weeks. We feel confident that our community has a handle on this, that our community cares just as much as we do, that they're going to wear their masks even though they don't believe in it, that they're going to wash their hands, they're going to practice social distancing still, even though they're sick and tired of it. And if we can see these numbers drop, I do see them, they're going up. It doesn't look like a surge, quote unquote surge to me, but we see it. I see what they're looking at. But if we can see that dip prior to 4 or 5 weeks, I would really like to consider getting our kids, especially our K through 5, in some of these schools. We got how many schools? 16 schools that will be dormant, right? 16 schools that will be dormant. And how many of those schools have enough classrooms across the county, across the division, where we can have K through 5 students in those classrooms being taught how to read and write and do arithmetic? I think that would be invaluable to so many parents that will be struggling, to so many students that will be lost at a very pivotal point in their career, their educational career here at WJCC. And this division, this community, is a beacon. It is a beacon for families. They come here because of this division, all right? I think we've stood out before, and I think we can stand out again by saying, you know what, we are safe enough to open earlier than that 9 weeks, and this is how we're going to do it. I don't want to belabor that point, but I believe we need to look at that. Our community is young. Sorry. Young. I am concerned for our community because we heard tonight, I mean, it was essentially split in half, right, Ms. Omi? It was essentially split in half what folks like, and I've seen that. I've seen that in the phone calls, and I've seen that in the emails. There is not consensus. There is a great divide in this, and I think what I would most want our community to know is that we desire for your students to be in school. I personally desire for your students to have the greatest education that they can possibly have, the greatest education that they would want for themselves, for a future that they would desire for themselves, and that they would know that the sky is not even the limit, not even the limit. And so our community needs to really come together for their students. We as a board need to model that, and that's what I'm trying to do. I hope I'm doing that well, but we need to model that for those that are watching and say, you know what, we've got a path, but we also have discourse. We also have discussion, and you know, what does the future look like? Well, we can all be a part of that, but we can be a part of that civilly, with respect and dignity for one another. And unfortunately, I've not seen a whole lot of that, but we need to see more of that. And I think we can model that here. I think our Board of Supervisors are doing a well enough job modeling that, but we need our parents, we need our teachers modeling that as well, especially for their students, because like it's been stated here, COVID's going to be with us for a good long while, right? And so we need to get around each other and supporting each other. But that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dow. I guess I get to sum up. So I do agree with much of what my colleagues have said. I do have to disagree with Mr. Dow. With respect to this being an administrative decision, I do think that our board is wise, and we are often held up as a board to strive to be like. And so I think we are very clear in recognizing that this is Dr. Herron's decision, and certainly one that we can understand and support, but I do believe it's administrative in nature. And And to that point, I think it's important for families to know the decision that has been made so that they can plan for that. So recognizing that there is a timeline, I think, is more important, even though it's a timeline that none of us want or like. Families need to be able to plan around that. I think it is clear based on what Dr. Herron and staff have presented tonight that we will continue to move through the continuum of paths as safely as we can based on data and trends. With my mom hat on, I want my youngest two at Lafayette High School. My youngest with dyslexia is not going to do well with online learning. I wish he could be there 5 days a week, but I know that that's not what we need to do right now. And
Madam
so,
Chair, before you continue, can I respond to that?
if I could finish all my comments, and yeah, and then, so I know that for me personally, the September is not the September that I had envisioned, and so I've kind of gone through the grieving process, recognizing it's going to be very different. We're not going to see all those yellow school buses like we typically do, although there will be some yellow buses on the street, and they will be transporting students, and they will be connecting with some of our most vulnerable students. Like I have said before, and Mr. Kelly, I think that we need to have volumes of patience and compassion and flexibility, and just embrace that this is a different and a new way of learning, and we're going to make the best of it, and it's not going to be perfect, and we are going to learn, and we're going to get better at it. But I think that that our staff and our leader of our division have used sound data and information to inform their thinking, and so I support her wholeheartedly. So,
Yeah, the only thing I want to respond to is that it seems that I've been misconstrued. I am affirming that the policy states that it is an administrative decision. What I'm asking for is that a policy committee down the road take a look at that policy and take a look at what we may have learned in this environment at this very high level in a global pandemic, and maybe we adjust that policy. I'm not suggesting that the policy does not, at the current time, state that it's an administrative decision.
thank you. Thank you. And I guess, and we do regularly look at our policies, and I guess I would suggest that that the policy would stand, but you're right, we do have a policy committee that could take a look at that. But I appreciate everyone's thoughts, and based on what I've heard tonight, it sounds like the majority, if not all of us, stand behind our superintendent in this decision that none of us are happy with, period. None of us are happy. All of us want students in their classrooms 5 days a week. That's where we want them to be, and that's where the teachers want to be. We just can't do that right now. And so I know that we will move along that continuum and look forward to when things look more normal. So with that, we're going to go back to 7.1, which is information on the completed capital improvement plan projects.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Snipes is going to take us, hopefully, quite quickly through the capital improvement projects for this year. Next year's will not take much time.
Next year's will be much easier.
So hopefully we can go through this. Thank you, Mr. Snipes.
Again, good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, and Dr. Herron. Before I begin, I wanted to be expeditious to answer a question from earlier. Ms. Young, we have 9 McKinney-Vento students that we transport to summer camp. We usually transport about 20, but now we have about 9 summer.
Thank you very much,
Lack of
Mr.
interest.
Snipes. Boy, that was fast.
Yeah, well, the expediency of which I go through this presentation is not indicative of how expedient we go through projects, just so you know that.
I appreciate it.
Okay, I want you to know that. And I know you guys had a lot to talk about tonight, and as we say in operations, may the roof never fall in, and may the friends who collaborate underneath never fall out. So congratulations on what you guys have done tonight. Each year, the Capital Improvement Committee meets to review potential projects to include the school division in the school division's overall budget. Subsequently, the superintendent and the staff develop and recommend a capital improvement plan to the school board for review and adoption. And upon the school board's review, adoption, and approval, our funding partners provide us the funds, and school operations staff coordinates and oversees the project. So tonight, I'll provide the board with an update on the status of some completed CIP projects from last year, as well as a large expenditure from the end-of-year spending plan. I remember Jim last year had As you can see, the 2019-2020 completed projects, which you will review tonight, are the Cooley Field improvements, the Berkeley well removal, Matthew Whaley chiller and hot water heater replacement, some improvements to the Matthew Whaley parking lot, the Berkeley auditorium seating, Lafayette main electrical switch gear, the Lafayette panels, the Lafayette sewer line, the Laurel Lane HVAC replacement, the Jamestown HVAC replacement, some division-wide entrance redesigns. Next slide, please. The school entrance redesigns at Toano, Lafayette, Berkeley, and there will also be 3 others, all came in under budget. See, on the left is Toano. Now when you enter Toano, you enter through the first 2 doors, but before you could go right or left, now you will be funneled directly into the office. You are not allowed to go right into the cafeteria area or left into the theater area. At Lafayette, as you enter to the front entrance, there are a bank of doors now that will walking directly into the upper common. At Berkeley, I don't know if you can see that, on the right is the outside. As you walk in, there are now a bank of doors that will not allow you to walk onto that hall. You have to go through that wood door there. Next slide. At Laurel Lane, you have a door to the right into the office, but you can no longer walk directly down that hall. You have to go into the office to the right. And at James River, now that gray door there was not there previously, that is directly into the office. You cannot enter to the school. One of the most biggest project was the Stonehouse project, where you had a large enclosure now that funnels everyone through the office when you come through the main building. Now, our Cooley Field improvements were delayed for a couple of 2 years because we were trying to get the school online, and now when the school came online, we were able to do some field improvements. Those field improvements were along with fencing, a new press box and tower renovation, as well as concession stands, ticket booth, scoreboard, and the locker room updated. Now, again, at Lafayette, there were some switchgear replacement and panel replacement that had been present there since the school inception, and they were removed. We did a sewer line replacement at Lafayette High School, as well as a roof replacement. Berkeley well removal had been on there for a while, but we finally removed that, and that was a safety, improved safety there because there was a well out back. And then the auditorium seating at Berkeley was upgraded, and it looks spectacular. We had some HVAC projects, the War Hill Cooling Tower, which was originally budgeted at $100,530. That came in under budget because our HVAC staff actually did that project for us, so we did not. Excuse me. The Jamestown HVAC originally budget was $5,899,750. Actually came in, the bid was came in over the.
Why?
There are a number of reasons. There could be commodities, there could have been lack of bidding, there are reasons. Sometimes bids come in under the budget and sometimes they come in over. We do track those, and since 2010, we've only had like 6 bids that come in over budget.
Took action on that. We knew that at the time.
Yes,
Yeah,
at
right,
the time.
okay.
Yes,
I
we knew
remember
that at the time. And then at Laurel Lane, as you can see, it came in $2 million less. So there are a number of factors that cause the rise and fall of the Matthew Whaley parking lot. The original parking lot only included a part of that parking lot, and that's the budget amount. However, we had money remaining in the Division CIP parking lot budget. If we would not have done that remainder part of that, I could show you the last slide. It was not pretty. We needed to do the entire lot, and that was approved by you at the time. And the Matthew Whaley chiller, actually, the actual expenditures came in a little bit more than was expected after some change orders. This was an end-of-year spending plan that you guys approved with the War Hill track. As you recall, the War Hill track we have expanding and retracting, and we had some drainage issues, and the track is in wonderful shape now. And then our security camera upgrades. This brings us to about 98% of our cameras are upgraded. The 2% that are remaining are in our parking lots and some of our exterior cameras, but every internal camera now has been upgraded to digital analog. Now, as Dr. Herron said, next year's...
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. I'll ask that offline. I'm sorry.
As Dr. Herron said earlier, next year's update will be a little less for you. We have completed the Stonehouse roof evaluation and some repairs there. We actually have some money remaining there, and we're going to go do some more work. We just have another quote for that. Toronto replaced the storefront windows when we did the entrance redesign, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, the War Hill cooling tower was done by our maintenance and HVAC staff. So there are some projects that we put on hold this year because of the pandemic. The Stonehouse partial refurbishment, the Norwich partial refurbishment, the repainting of the Matoka roof and some roof sections. The Berkeley HVAC design is now at 30% design. We put that on hold. The James River partial refurbishment, the Jamestown walk-in fridge and the Jamestown generator, which will help with some of the upgrading for our hub for the IT. The high-scale expansion design, which we were talking about with the county at War Hill, and some division sidewalk and concrete repairs, and of course, some playground equipment. Playground equipment is not a safety-related. These are mulchings. Questions?
Snipes. Kelly?
Sure. So I appreciate the update. I appreciate all the great work that and to implement those projects. We all know the challenges we have with capital budget going forward. It is still incumbent upon you to bring to us projects that affect safety, projects that affect the health of our students and staff, and projects that will, if not implemented, will result in additional damage to additional costs out forward. So it's still incumbent upon you and your team to put the pressure on us to find those capital dollars to make sure we're doing right by our community, basically. To do so, I appreciate the stuff that's been pushed out, but I don't want to be where our friends in York were last year, right? So.
And that's a good point. I know Ms. Ewing is planning to a capital improvement plan in this month, starting that process.
Still keep putting the pressure on us about those.
Full court press, I promise.
Thank you.
Questions or comments for Mr. Snipes?
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Snipes. Okay, so now we're moving on to action items. Is there a motion to approve our personnel actions with 8.1?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the personnel actions as presented this evening.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Surza?
Mrs. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. Dowell,
Aye.
Ms. Hummel,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Ms. Zomby.
Aye. Is there a motion to approve item 8.2, the 2020-2021 CNS food and consumables purchase?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval to issue contracts to the following vendors for child nutrition services, food and consumable purchases under existing cooperative agreements, SFS PAC and First Colony Pizza.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Should we name the amounts or no?
Yeah, sure. In the amount, in the cumulative amount for SFS PAC of $144,000 and First Colony Pizza $964,870.
Thank you. And I heard a second. Any discussion?
A lot of pizza.
Over 5 years.
Where's the ice cream?
It's over 5 years.
Oh, it's over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
That's a little bit better.
Hearing
Make
no
that clear.
additional comments or questions, Ms. Surza?
Ms. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. Dowell,
Aye.
Ms. Hummel, Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Mrs. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Zomby.
Aye. Okay, moving on to board matters and requests. I'll start with Mr. Dow.
I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dow. Ms. Young?
Okay, I only have two quick things. First of all, I agree with Mr. Dow that we need a policy for catastrophic events. I mean, even if it's basically saying that we support the superintendent, I do think we need that. So I would request that we ask the policy committee to come up with that, because hopefully it's not going to happen too often. I mean, this is the first time that I've even known of anything like this. And I guess secondly, I just wanted to express my appreciation for this board, because I think even though at times we disagree, I think we are respectful of each other and respect each other's opinion. And I think generally we are very supportive of our superintendent. We did a good deal when we hired her.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Cook?
I think we are, I'm impressed with the amount of listening and talking this board has done, and research and thought. So thanks to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Herron, for all your work, and to staff. I think a pretty important announcement came from the DOE today about accreditation. I don't want to waste anyone's time tonight, but maybe in the future you could put that on the agenda about accreditation and what that means for us. If
Absolutely.
we could just update the public on that, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Mr. Kelly?
As Mr. Dowell said, I think I talked enough earlier, but I would like to just say one thing. I appreciate your comments, and I certainly appreciate the policy committee. We set that committee up to do the dirty work of the board versus doing it at the board table. And, it's a way that we can incorporate lessons learned, and for our future selves, or for whoever's sitting in these chairs, to take advantage of the thoughts that we have had here. I'm not sure that necessarily something good for them to consider. I'm not sure I'm really in favor of anything being changed, but just certainly something for them to consider. I also would hope that Dr. Herron does not feel like she's on an island here when making this decision. I think she has the full support of the entire board, and I think that is pretty evident to the community after tonight's meeting too, and tonight's discussion, that we are definitely in support of the process that you've gone through, and how you've worked through this, and how you will continue to work through this. I also, I want to get the path forward as quick as we can. I want to thank Dr. Dolan for coming here tonight and distilling all that data, and really kind of giving us a one-piece context. I know she was pinch hitting pretty deep, and we had to go into the bullpen, but I think we came out with a pretty good ace there to help us kind of put our thoughts where we are. I thank the members of the administration who have worked on this, on getting us to where we need to be in September, for the work that our teachers are currently doing, and what they're going to do to meet the needs of our students, and helping them with the teaching and learning that's going to go on. And as you say, modeling. Here we are wearing our masks, doing the best that we can to model that, and as well as has been said by several board members, being respectful, being civil, and that's not often in our political world these days, and I miss it. So trust, civility, and respect, right? So anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Hummel?
As the member on the policy committee, I'm happy whatever you guys want to up for discussion and discuss it. Whatever you guys.
Those
Versa, do we have,
policies
like-
are on a cycle. When did
Unless the General Assembly takes action, usually. I mean, Mr. Kelly set the committee up when he was chair. He kind of,
I don't know if you want to bring policy, I don't know when that policy is due for.
That's what I was asking.
19 is when it was adopted in 10. We renewed it in 19.
We just looked at it, but
Looked at it last year. But,
Just looked at it last year, yeah.
but last year was a different time.
It was a different time. I mean,
Than where we are
anyway,
this year.
I revisiting it, if people want to revisit it, I'm fine for,
No crystal balls, though.
huh?
I understand you don't have a crystal ball.
No, I mean, but if you guys,
I mean, it doesn't hurt, I support it as it stands,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to,
Yeah, I mean-
I'm happy to.
So it's We can think about it going forward.
Okay, so we'll,
A lot of things on our plate.
I know we do. Okay, so what do I do? Do I consult with?
I
Beers? What do
think you and I and Dr. Heron
Okay, I just,
and Beers can,
all right. And then, yeah, I do think that we have a very civil board, and it is very nice, because when I read the paper about some of the stuff that's been going on with our surrounding communities and how politicized the boards become, these like 8-hour board meetings and very, very disruptive, I would assume very disruptive for the superintendent as well, that I do appreciate our policy of letting the administration and support you. So, because otherwise, why are we paying you, the superintendent? So, hired you, we're paying you to do the best job, and we are hoping, I'm hoping, that we're giving you the coverage, the support that you need when you do make the decision about the support without getting a bunch of politics involved. Anyway, that's my comment.
I'd have to say I agree wholeheartedly. And I just want to say I'm grateful for this board. I think each of us are very passionate about K-12 and about our students and our teachers and all of our employees. And I know each of us care deeply about the success of this division. And so I thank you for that. I think that what makes our board so good is that we do know our role, and I think we try to stay in our lane and follow good governance, and we work really well together, and I think we mentor each other and we support each other, and so I appreciate that. I am disappointed that our representative from VDH wasn't able to come, and so I'm looking forward to that at our next meeting. Again, this was a gut-wrenching decision. It wasn't an easy one. Thank you, Dr. Heron, for your temperament, your demeanor, your thoughtfulness. And I'm glad that you have supportive staff who've worked with you and supported you and helped you come to the conclusion that we're at right now. So moving on to our upcoming events, Policy Committee is meeting
Oh, yeah.
on August 13th at 8 o'clock in the morning on.
Sounds like an opportunity.
Yeah, in room 300. And then our next meeting is on the 18th, 6 p.m. here in the annex. Closed session begins at 6, regular meeting at 6:30. And then September 1, here in the annex, closed session is at 6, and the work session begins at 6:30. I did forget one thing I wanted to mention. So this morning, I was interviewed by locallegislator.net. I know they interviewed Mr. Dow right after he was elected, and so I just wanted to put that out there, that the interviewer was asking questions about the board's role in the decision-making process, and the purpose of our board and who gives us our authority. And so if anyone wants to go online, it's locallegislator.net. You can tell I did. Did I pass the test? I don't know. Mr. Dow did a really great job, and he had only been on the job like a week when he was interviewed. Google it. So looking forward to upcoming agenda items, I know wrote it down somewhere, Janet, but I forgot. So we're going to look at the space analysis. We're going to do an update on the space analysis. Is that right?
Approve the items from tonight, budget calendar, buses,
Yeah.
policy.
That's the upcoming agenda, and unless there are additional comments, concerns, thank you, everyone. And this meeting is adjourned.